not precinct locations, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, you're correct. We did of the vote centers.
Okay, and could you have done both? Could you have moved back to the precinct? Because I know it says precinct in statute. What again was the reasoning to just do the 2% of the vote centers versus 2% of precinct?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, well, state, or at least through the elections procedures manual, when you use vote centers, that calls for you to do a hand count using vote centers. So that's one reason we did it, is because that's what the elections procedures manual calls for. But secondly, it's not practical for us unless we did 100% hand count, because all the ballots come back to us and are secured by vote center. So we have them, as I described earlier, in the poll workers put them into these black canvas bags. Those black canvas bags are then sealed with tamper evident seals. They come back to us. And because it's a vote center model, any voter could vote at any one of our vote centers. So the only way then to go back through and separate those ballots into a precinct would be to, first off, break the chain of custody. And then have to then manually sort through all 167,000 of those ballots into a precinct. And then you would never be able to go back and put them into a vote center order. And if a court ever called into and wanted to look at how those votes were counted for one specific vote center, we would not be able to satisfy that request.
So, Mr. Chairman, okay. So obviously there needs to be a fix there, because we have the election procedural manual that is overriding over what the statute says. It looks like that was done knowing that statute didn't align with the procedural manual. So we're all going to need to work together to make sure that language fits and flows together, so we don't have that contradiction, because that led to a lot of consternation with people. But on this issue of not being able to do the precinct, I just want to get clarity on that, because as I'm looking in the Dominion contract, it says that it's capable of sorting and filtering images of ballots by ballot style, precinct, polling location, contest, or candidate for the purpose of a recount or post-election audit. Officials can review all of the digital ballot images in an election or a subset of the ballots based on the chosen filtering conditions. So just as I read that, it sounds like you can easily filter it at a precinct level.
But that's not describing a hand count. A hand count is using the actual physical ballots. And that's what the hand count boards use. So because we chose to use a vote center model, the ballots were stored, secured in those tamper evident canvas bags by vote center. There's no way to physically do that, a hand count as what's described in statute by precinct.
Okay, but I thought that, Mr. Chairman, just if you'll indulge me, I thought that the digital image was connected to an actual ballot, so that you could go find. Is it that you can't do it because it's very time consuming, perhaps, or you literally couldn't do it?
So the digital image is connected to an actual ballot. However, hand count boards don't do hand counts based on the digital images. They do it on the actual physical ballot, and that's pursuant to statute.
So to that point, so what I'm hearing is that you decided to change the voting process to these voting centers, knowing beforehand that you would not be able to satisfy this statutory obligation to do a 2% hand count by precinct. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's not correct. So statute in 2000, I believe it was 2012, allowed and authorized the use of vote centers. That was approved by the legislature. And in the elections procedures manual, it clearly states that when you use vote centers, then you use the vote centers to conduct a hand count. So we made our decisions based off which the elections procedures manual has the force and effect of law. So we made the decisions based off the law that was in effect at that time.
Okay, so you under current statute, you believe you you have the option to do either the vote center 2% count or the precinct 2% count.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Senator Ugenti Rita, please continue.
Okay, so if the online image of the ballot is connected with a hard paper ballot, just one more time for me, why can you not do the hand count of the precincts?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, because we are doing the hand count using the paper ballots, not the digital images. So statute requires that we do a hand count of those paper ballots. Those paper ballots come from the vote centers, so they're all stored. So if you go to any one single vote center, there could be any number of precincts in those ballots. So the only way to then get those into precinct order would then be to break the seal on all 175 vote center canvas bags, then sort them, and you'd never be able to put them back into that order that they originally came from the vote center.
So you wouldn't be able to put it back in the order that you took them out of those canvas bags, but you would be able to do it, but it's cumbersome and time consuming.
And yes, it could take, right, we're supposed to start this process, get our hand count done, and it would have taken, I couldn't even estimate, but probably a week or two just to sort them into the correct order, then to perform the hand count.
Okay, would there be value in doing a hand count and a digital count, since per the contract you can very easily what did it say? You could very easily order you can very easily filter the ballots depending on what it is you wanted. Would there be value in that?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, anything could have value. I believe that the current processes that we have in place through the logic and accuracy testing, that test the functionality of the system, the certification process of the system, as well as the electronic adjudication piece to this. When those boards are performing electronic adjudication, they are creating manual logs, logging every single action that they take. They're looking at the audit marks that are created from that first ballot that goes through the tabulator to now the second audit mark that gets created when that electronic adjudication report performs that function. We create then a system generated report that those electronic adjudicators use to compare every action that they took. They take that role incredibly seriously, and they would have identified issues or errors, and they didn't through that process. So I'm confident in our system. Now, based on what Senator Gray said about voter trust and hearing of concerns, I'm concerned about that. I want voters to have 100% confidence, be as confident as I am in the selection process. So I am willing to talk through what type of changes, at a future date, when we start talking about legislation that could be implemented, to help rebuild that confidence so those voters have the same level of confidence that I do.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, and the reason I bring that up is I'm just trying to take advantage of the technology that you guys are leasing. So if we're going to have these digital images and store them, then perhaps we could put them to use other than just adjudicating. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Borelli, did you have a question? You're on mute, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Jarrett, one more question. You were going back to the signature verification in the signature verification room. After they verify their signatures in that room, do they open up the ballots and send them out to be tabulated, or do they keep them sealed until they get in the other room to be tabulated?
So the signature verification folks do not open up the ballots. That's a separate room. It's our early ballot processing room. Those bipartisan boards, members of different parties do the separation. So and then after they are separated from the ballots, the ballots are separated from the envelopes, then they're transferred to our ballot tabulation center to be tabulated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett. In a previous meeting, there were people that swore under oath, under penalty and perjury, that they were in that tabulating room waiting for ballots to come out of the signature verification room. And they swore that those envelopes were already opened before they got to them. Are you aware of anything like that happening? I mean, no, everybody can't be in the same place all at once. So, I mean, have you heard anything about that?
I'm not aware of that testimony, and I'm not aware of that happening in Maricopa County. So if they only get opened once they have a good signature by our EV processing boards.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, you just said once they verify the signatures on the envelopes, that they get sent to another room to get opened up and counted.
So, Mr. Chairman, so the process is after a ballot has a good signature, it comes back from our vendor, which it was secured in a vault. The envelope is still sealed at that point. We have a mail room with that. We send these ballots through an envelope slicer, right? We're doing this for $2 million or $1.9 million that came back through Maricopa County. Then they're immediately transferred from the mail room to the EV processing board, those bipartisan boards that actually remove them from the ballot. If they do not have, so the only ballots that are in our signature verification rooms are in ballots that have a need packet. Those are sealed. They're not open. And those envelopes then will have a log of all the attempts that we are working through to try to cure that signature with the voter themselves, making phone calls, sending letters. If the signature is blank, sending that ballot back to the voter so if time allots that they can then add their signature to the ballot and send it back to us. So, but those ballots that are in that room, the signature verification room, are not open.
Right. So when it leaves the signature verification room, even if they've made numerous phone calls trying to contact that voter, they can't contact them. Obviously, it's going to go over to a different bin because it's kind of like a dead file. But the ones that get verified and they leave that room, they are unopened, correct?
That's correct. And they would need to go to our mail room to open them and then transfer them to our early ballot processing boards.
Thank you.
Senator Leach, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett. When we talk about Dominion and the people on site, when were the Dominion people? When did they arrive on site for the election? Using the election day, were they there at the beginning of early ballots being counted, or did they come in for November 3rd? Well, let's take that question first.
Mr. Chairman, so we have actually two members from Dominion that have an office here in the elections department, and they assist us with working. Sorry, having a connection. Mr. Chairman, can you still hear me?
I can.
Thank you. So they have an office here and they assist us with any tasks that we have, any expertise that we need. So when we implemented this system, those individuals are involved in training our staff to program elections and training our staff to create ballots for each election. Our staff do all of that functionality now. However, those Dominion staff are available to support us through an election. And in Maricopa County, we had 5 elections this year. So they were here for that entire period. Now, there are times where they are not here and they're working on elections for other counties, but they were here before and during this election.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, were they, could they come and go as they pleased? Was that office available to them 24/7?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, yes, they have access to our facility. They have a badge access and they're authorized to enter.
Could they, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, could they be there on their own without someone from the county watching what they were doing or how they were acting?
Mr. Chairman, yes, Dominion can enter and be here because they have access to our facility. Now, all our ballot tabulation center, anything that's connected to our reporting system is under a 24/7 live camera.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, so they could be working on the equipment without supervision from the county. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, only under our direction, but yes, they do have access to the facility.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, direction and observation are two different things in my mind's eye. Is that correct, Mr. Jarrett?
But you are, as you described, they do have the ability to access the facility when we have staff members not here.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, being under camera, as we've already discussed, with the distance that poll watchers and poll workers had to be, and submitting the approval of using binoculars, might that camera have the same problem, being substantial away from what the Dominion workers were actually doing?
So Mr. Chairman, I'd say there's many controls in process that would prevent them from doing anything and tampering with the equipment that we would not identify. First is that logic and accuracy test that's done by the Secretary of State as well as our staff. That confirms the firmware that's installed on the equipment. That's done the day before we mail out any ballots. If there was anything that had been altered on this equipment, we would identify it at that point in time. We do another logic and accuracy test post the election to confirm that it's the exact same software that's programmed on this equipment. And then, as I described before, if there have been any changes or altercations made to the equipment during the process, that would have rendered all those ballots that we sent out, those 2 million ballots that we sent out, any ballot that we print in the vote center, unreadable by our tabulators. So the Dominion staff that are working here could not make any changes during election without us detecting them.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, in an earlier point that I think that you were making to a question that I had, you said it depends on how the audit request or the audit guidelines are written. Would you have any input on how it should be written to make sure that all the above that I just talked about, and not limited to that, could be included in any such audit done by the county or anyone else?
Yes, when we are drafting the RFP or the scope of work, I could provide some assistance in that process. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, thank you for your answers, but let me share with you, and it goes back to what Senator Gray said. There seems to be in the part of the county a lot of checks and balances. Maybe some of it just hasn't gotten out to the public. Part of this, the reason for this meeting, I think the chairman's holding it, is to get this information out. But secondarily, we need to know going forward if in fact the lawsuit were to end today, the appeal was on today, and you would go into an audit, I would hope that members of this committee would have direct involvement in establishing parameters for the audit, obviously with expert help. And should the committee have to go forward on its own, certainly we would like to know how to structure that. So that's more of a comment than a question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chairman, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Jarrett, going back to the Dominion office, what kind of work did they do? I'm assuming they had computers there. Were they using their computers to facilitate what you needed them to do?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gray, yes, they have computers that our IT staff provide them. And yes, when we have requests for assistance, they assist us. Now, the computers that they're using on a daily basis are not connected to the election reporting system or the Dominion software. These are in their office. We actually have access to that office. It's really a cubicle that they sit in And there's no way for us to not be able to see what's going on at any point in time when they're in their office work.
So Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jared, you're saying that they have absolutely no connection or capability of having connection with the software at all?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gray, let me clarify. So in the computers that they're using on a daily basis, those do not. But yes, we give them, and under supervision and under direction, we ask them to assist with some expertise of the election reporting system, especially during election when we're transferring files from batches to the report. They are accessing the actual election reporting system. So they are manning some of those stations, but entirely when we have staff available during an election.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jared, I also heard you say that if there was any change, that basically the software would not function right, the machines would not work. So are you telling me if there is an X or an O, maybe a few X's and O's, 6 of them, that are changed in that software, that it will totally malfunction?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Gray, that's correct. Once we finalize that election programming code for those ballots, there's the hash code, the marks that, the timing marks that will tell the tabulator when to award a vote or not a vote. That is unique to each election. So if there was any change to an election code during the process, it would render all the remaining ballots unreadable. All the pre-printed ballots that we mailed out, or ballots that then would be printed at a vote center on election day to be tabulated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jared, my concern is that, again, depending on the requirement of change, if there was a major change, whether or not that software would cause that machine to malfunction, or whether or not was structured to where if there were certain minor changes, that it would, in essence, still maintain its veracity as a functioning piece of software, but it could impact the election. And the only reason I say that is there's huge concern about the reliability and the potential compromise of Dominion software.
So, Mr. Jarrett, who is it that writes the code for that software? Is it your office or is it the vendor?
So our office programs each specific election and creates the ballot style, but the source code is written by the vendor and the manufacturer. So there's two different pieces of code, right? The source code is what that goes through the EAC Elections Assistance Commission through their certification process. That is proprietary software. Our staff have no knowledge or expertise in what that source code is involved with the source code.
So
a specific election, sorry, go ahead.
Are you suggesting that those who have written the source code couldn't modify it at all without invalidating that election? I mean, is that what you're saying? There's no possible way for them to modify the code?
So, Mr. Chairman, based on my understanding of the system is that once we program a specific election on using that software, any alteration or change to the software or that election program itself would then render those ballots that we've created not readable.
Okay, I'm not a programmer, but I have a hard time believing that the people who are writing the underlying source code could not incorporate the code that has been written in for a specific election, which is layered over the source code. My concern here, Mr. Jarrett, is not that there was malfeasance. I don't know, but I do have a concern that the county is taking the position that it just can't happen. I mean, there is a litany of white collar crimes, digital crimes in the history of this country and in this world from some very sophisticated people and the victims didn't recognize it until some future time. So again, I'm not making any allegations, but I think it's really, really dangerous for us to say it can't happen. I think we need to be open to the fact that it can. And I'm not just talking about this election, I'm talking about future elections. That's from a personal perspective, I just think that's a dangerous position to take.
To that point, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Gray, to that point.
Yes, that's one of the reasons I brought up the concern about these minor changes in the software program, because they do know their software, and obviously they're selling their product, but they know their software. And when you can go in and you can tinker with something, there's a possibility. And as the chairman said, I'm not saying that that's what happened. Let me be clear. I am not saying that that's what happened. But what I am saying is there is enough concern by our voters in our county that do have concerns about it. And I have questions about that. You are very confident that nothing happened. I hope that's the case. But I think it behooves us, when there are concerns, to verify that. That's why I think it's critical that we have an independent, qualified team of cyber experts that can come in and do an audit of that software and make sure that nobody else has touched that after. And I'm assuming, and I hope, that you would have locked that down and not had your Dominion employees working on that to be able to make changes to take it back. But I think, again, for our voters' sense of confidence in our voter system, we have to have that type of forensic audit to make sure that what we've got is a viable piece of software that wasn't contaminated, that didn't skew voters. And that's important, whether Republican or Democrat. A vote is a protected, people have died for that. Our majority whip, Senator Borelli, has fought for that overseas. So it's a high priority, I think, that should provoke the county to say, we need to verify this at whatever it takes to make sure that there isn't one little piece that was changed that wouldn't have been big enough to completely cause a dysfunction in the software, but could have compromised the voting integrity of those machines.
Thank you. Senator Borelli. You're on mute, Senator.
I figured you guys like me on mute a lot, so.
I'll second that.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, I agree with the chairman that your position that this is like 100% secure and safe is a little misleading, because even in the owner's manual or the operations manual, the Dominion software on section 8.2, beginning on page 41, it actually clarifies and says how data can be changed and votes switched around and so on and so forth. So now my question, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett. Now, I remember watching a Board of Supervisors meeting where one of the Board of Supervisors said that, obviously, you just stated that Dominion software people have an office space in the county building. They provided them with all that convenience. So you had also said that no nefarious things can happen because everything is on camera. So is there a camera in their office space that's monitored 24/7?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Borelli, so in their office space, they don't have access to the election reporting system. So the actual system that we use to program any election on it, the server itself, they have zero access to that system from their office space.
Okay, but you do not have video cameras in their office, so you really can't see what they're doing in their office, correct?
That's correct. We do not have cameras of their office, but again, they have zero access to the actual election reporting system from their office.
Okay, so you also stated that they're not hooked up. They're hooked up to the internet in their office, but it's actually an internal internet. But there's Wi-Fi on their laptops, and they've had laptops. and Wi-Fi. I'm in my condo right now on my laptop, and I'm hooked up to the Wi-Fi. And so to say that they don't have any other access sending data outside a secure area, that's a pretty strong statement. So I kind of find it hard to, I'm not calling you any names or inferring anything. I just find it really difficult to believe that, look, nothing's 100% secure. If people want to cheat, they're going to cheat. People want to steal. That's why we put locks on doors. But our constituents are screaming for blood. They want to make sure that their right, their obligation, their privilege to vote is protected 100%. And the integrity has to be maintained. And I, regardless of Republican or Democrat, just for future elections, we need to make sure that this is the protection of our democratic republic. So, you know, and anything that can be any computer can be programmed to do all kinds of stuff. They had in Michigan, they had 2 changes that only the audit was able to actually discover. So naturally, you all did the preliminary testing, which is good but you know, a lot of things happen during the performance of the system. So I really think hopefully we can work something out here where we get some continued cooperation from Maricopa County that we can get to the bottom of this. Anyway, I'm sorry, I just made a statement, but I find your statement that this is secure and 100% accuracy and integrity is a little bit hard to. No accusations to you.
Thank you. Senator Quesada, do you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I wanted to get some clarification from Mr. Jarrett, because I think our last couple of members that have asked you questions have implied that you are communicating that it is impossible for any wrongdoing to occur. And I'm not sure I heard that. What I'm hearing from you through your testimony is that you believe that if there were any type of improper activity, if that did happen, if codes were changed, if ballots were tampered with, that there would be evidence of that because of the multiple safeguard procedures that were in place that would basically raise a red flag and say to you, this is something that needs a closer look. And that through these multiple safeguards, these oversights, these audits, these protections that have been implemented, there hasn't been any evidence of that. Is that what I'm hearing you say, that it's not an impossibility, it's just that there's zero evidence of that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Quesada, that's absolutely correct. I have not testified that it's 100% accurate or that it's impossible. What I've testified is I'm confident in our system and the integrity of our system and the security of our system through the combination of everything through EAC certification to the Secretary of State certification to the logic and accuracy test, the programming to the staff, the expertise of my staff at the elections department, to the post logic and accuracy tests, to the hand count audits that did not find any issues, and through all those court cases where we submitted evidence, we went back and did additional review. So through all of that process is what leads me to have confidence in our election that it was done that way. But I've not testified that it's unfathomable or impossible for something to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I don't think anyone was confused, Mr. Quesada. In fact, my position was that the source code, because the county doesn't have access to the source code, nor did they develop the source code could be changed. And if it could hide what they're doing, the testimony was they could not do that. That would be impossible for them to do that without us knowing, because it would invalidate. That's the concern that I have. When we believe that it's impossible for them to do something without us knowing, that opens the door to, in my opinion, maybe overconfidence is the best way to put it. Okay, we have Senator Leach. You have your digital hand up. You need to unmute, Senator.
Should be up and live now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jared. There have been allegations of increased internet traffic, IP traffic, from the 3rd of November on. Could you address that and maybe put a fine point on the internet connection? I know that you've said that it wasn't connected to the internet. I'm not sure if there was a stop date on that when it was connected to the internet, and the amount and the direction of this internet traffic being alleged.
Mr. Chairman, members, I am not aware of any increased internet activity coming from our election department servers, so I can't speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Jared.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Jarrett, do you have more of your presentation?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one more slide.
Okay, apparently we have Mr. Gray. Do you want to, okay, you want to wait till after the slide? Okay, Mr. Jarrett, please go ahead and finish your presentation.
So the last piece of my presentation just goes over the security of the election, and we've actually talked through many components of this through the questions from the committee, but just wanted to highlight, and there's no way that I can describe every single security protocol that we implement to ensure the security of the election, but wanted to highlight several of them. First is we do restrict access to the ballot tabulation center, the vault, the server, to individuals that have a need to be in there, so a direct job responsibility, oversight. This does include the Dominion staff that do have responsibilities to serve us under our direction. We perform background checks, criminal background checks at the county level, the state level, and the national level of all of our employees. This includes our full-time staff, and we do this as well for temporary staff. We do voter registration confirmation. Now this serves a couple items. First, you can't vote if you have a felony. And so that confirms they don't have a felony on their record. And we need to confirm party affiliation. So when we're assigning members to these boards, these electronic adjudication boards, duplication boards, EV processing boards, but it's also, we verify voter registration information for political party observers. We don't do a background check on the observers themselves. The parties themselves appoint these individuals, but we do a voter registration check before we allow them into these sensitive areas. We have, it's been mentioned many times that our tabulation equipment is on a hardwired, isolated network, and it's not connected to the internet. There was a discussion item made earlier about making this information available to the voters. And we have a BeBallotReady.vote website where voters can go and get a customized dashboard to check their voter registration status, all those types of things. But we have actually several useful videos on that site. And one of them covers tabulation security. You can actually trace, the video even traces the wires from the tabulators themselves to the server room. You can see many of the security protocols right through that video. Probably does even a better job of articulating what our security protocols are than mine, than I'm doing today. So a very useful video. There's also videos on there on ID, and you need to vote at a voting location, early ballot processing. So those types of things, a lot of good, useful information. Talked about the security fobs and the passwords. So many different layers of security for the equipment themselves. Not only do you need to have a key to access it, you need to be able then to have the password itself, be able to access any system. That includes our central count tabulators, as well as the tabulators that are out at the vote centers. We have different user modes and different security settings on this equipment. I described that we have a user mode. So once our election is active for our central count tabulators, they are put into a user mode where they only can accept, they can scan, accept, or reject ballots. No other activity can be done on those central count tabulators in that user mode, and they stay in that mode for the entirety of the election. So we have an air gap. We do have to report results to our website and to the Secretary of State's website, but we create an air gap. So anytime that we plug a device into our our election reporting system, it is only used once. So we immediately open it from a sealed package. We open that device, and then that's when we insert it in, create a copy of those reports, those result reports, and then we take that thumb drive and we take it to a dedicated laptop that's only used to report results. But we never reuse that thumb drive. That thumb drive is then secured, and we keep that in our vault, and it will eventually be transferred to the treasurer's vault for the 2 years of record keeping as required by statute. I talked about our encrypted data memory cards, the tamper evident seals that are on the ports, how those have to be programmed simultaneously together. If you were to remove one of those memory cards from our precinct-based tabulator, that tabulator would not operate. If you were to accidentally exchange that tabulator, mix up the memory card from that one and a second tabulator, neither tabulator would work. It has to be the two that were programmed simultaneously. Those are encrypted, and then we have a very secure chain of custody process to return those back to the county. We also have robust audit logs on all of our systems. When a ballot goes through one of our central count tabulators or our precinct-based tabulators, there's an audit mark affixed to that digital image of the ballot that shows exactly how that tabulator calculated each contest or awarded each contest. So that is affixed through an audit mark. If that ballot had to go through electronic adjudication due to an overvote or a voter intent issue or a write-in, a new complete audit mark would be affixed to show how that tabulator was going to be read by our reporting system after the electronic adjudicators reviewed that ballot. We also use hard copy original ballots. So voters vote on a hard copy ballot. Those ballots, because of our new system and the digital images that they create, those ballots can be immediately secured. What you're seeing in this photo here on the left is our vault with all the different batches of all of those 1.9 million early ballots that were tabulated in this election. And then everything is on under camera 24/7, 365 days a year. So we have all that's video footage, and that video footage is backed up and available for review. So with that, that does conclude my presentation. I know that we have more presentations, one for Mr. Liddy as well, but if there are any other outstanding questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
How long is that video stored? How long is it available?
So statute does require us to keep it through the entire election cycle for November general election, and through the challenge period. And because we have these ongoing court cases, we've extended it, and we do have it all the way through this cycle as a backup.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gray, you had questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. One question, again, going back to Dominion, when was their last point of contact where you've asked them to do something that would have caused them to interface with the machines and the software?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Gray, I'd have to go through my records to see when my last specific contact was. I don't know that on the top of my head.
If you could get that for us, I think that would be very important. Again, my concern is the integrity of what was done and the feasibility of evaluating that. Another question I have outside of Dominion is, are you familiar with the grant that was given to Maricopa County from the Civic or the Center of Tech and Civic Life?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Gray, yes, I am aware of that grant.
Okay, that was a $3 million, almost $3 million. Is this, and I know this was, you're fairly new in your position, but can you tell me, were there any other years where we've had a private organization that gave money for our elections?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Gray, I can't speak to any prior years or elections. I know that this year was unique in responding to the challenges of COVID-19 needing to purchase new ballot-on-demand printers, making Dropbox sites available, all of those types of additional things. But what I do know is Maricopa County actually hasn't even expended any monies related to that grant at this point.
Well, I guess my concern, and I'm wondering if this is a concern for you, this group, which was funded by Mark Zuckerberg, known to have a little bit of an interest in politics, but he funded that to the tune of $350 million. Interestingly, he only targeted swing states in this election, and specifically areas that would produce possibly the best results for a certain side of the election. Does that raise any concern to you? I know it does to me, because as far as I'm concerned, I would have the same concerns as if we had the Koch brothers in funding certain things, and we had, basically, if they put together a software package that they sold to election officers and states specifically, and then we had some other millionaire, possibly a Donald Trump, in the next election that helped fund millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. To me, that would raise some concern. So was that anything that anybody has considered down at Maricopa County?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Gray, the acceptance of that money did not influence any of the operations. When that was being reviewed, it was, would it align with and help pay for the initiatives that we were already planning to implement for this election?
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, I'm not trying to infer that did at all influence you at all. And I do want to say, I think, looking at what you've done, I think kudos to the election department. You've been very thorough, very detailed. I would not want to have to do the job that you guys have done down there with all the details and the huge amount of work that was done. So I applaud you for all your work. I'm not questioning your integrity or the intent of anybody in the county. My concern is, again, with the veracity of this election process, and that's not just coming from me, it's echoed by thousands and thousands of our Maricopa County voters. And so that's why I am pressing, again, to have an audit to verify that absolutely nothing was done, a forensic audit on our equipment and the software. But again, I do want to applaud you for all of the extreme care that you've taken in making sure that what was done was as thorough as you could make it. But again, as you said, you're not a software expert. My concern is I'm not a software expert either. And so I would like to see the software experts actually do a thorough audit, forensic audit of that software to make sure that our voters can be able to say, this was a fair election. That's all I want to see, is this was a fair election. And I think that's what our voters want to see, and it's what our voters deserve. But again, thank you for all the work that you've done in sharing that information, and all the work you've done in making this election process as secure as it was.
And I think you're questioning, Senator Gray, of the $3 million is an issue of optics. Even if nothing was done that was nefarious, it still erodes the level of confidence by the voters when they learn that there is private money from either side that has come in to help run the elections department. So I would say that's something that needs to be addressed.
To that point, Mr. Chairman, that's why I brought it up. And it's the proverbial, if there's smoke, there's fire. I don't have evidence myself, and there's obviously been a lot of court cases where there hasn't been enough evidence. And as I've told many people, it's easy to argue a case in the court of public opinion, much tougher to argue a case in the court of justice. But again, where there's smoke, there's usually fire, or the potential of it. So yeah, that's exactly why I brought it up, is just to raise those concerns. And to me, it should encourage us to just prove to our voters that we've had a completely reliable election, so that they can feel confident confident that what came out of this is fair and accurate.
Thank you. Senator Leach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to follow up and maybe make a closing comment on this particular portion of what we're hearing today. You know, it is one thing, and I appreciate the work that the county has done. I've said this before in the opening remarks. Scott, thank you for the detail that you went into, but I am concerned about when we or the county puts themselves in a position that said, you know, this was best election, the best protected election. There's always room to make improvement, to catch something that we should have done, shoulda, coulda, woulda done better. Particularly now in an election where we have millions of eyeballs looking at every vote, every postmark, every iota of this election. I would hope that your enthusiasm for what was accomplished, what you believe was accomplished in this election, does not get in the way of coming with a long laundry list that said, we could have done this better, or the state needs to do this. And this goes not only to you, Scott, and this part of what I'm saying goes out to all of our counties. Bring it to us so that next time that we have this amount of voting that we had, the plethora of early ballots, that we are better prepared and our statutes are prepared to handle it, along with county ordinances, procurement regulations, how people are certified, what kind of training they go through, how will they actually know that when we train them for the 4 hours that it's stuck, and it was put into. There's just a lot of things that I know I have questions on, and I think from the questions this morning and the comments this morning from fellow committee members, they have the same. And so, however this all turns out, I would hope that you would have a ready list when Michelle Genti-Rita gavels in January of things that we can do better and make better, so we can get the integrity of an election system back in Arizona, which is sorely tarnished right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, in our mission statement for the Maricopa County Elections Department is to continuously improve and to evaluate. And absolutely, there were areas that we can improve upon. And we're already working through that with our teams. They're doing focus groups with our poll workers right now. We're hearing feedback from voters. So I can make that commitment, absolutely, that we will go through an initiative and be able to put together all the areas where we think that we can improve for elections moving forward.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Genti-Rita. You're on mute. Senator Genti-Rita, you're on mute.
How about now?
No, we can hear you. Please.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to touch on one of the bullets here in the last slide. You know, for me, a big part of voter integrity is making sure that those individual voters are meeting our eligibility requirements to vote. So you've got on here as part of your security bullets, voter registration confirmation. Can you talk to exactly what you do to make sure that those people who are indeed eligible to vote are voting? And I'm not just talking about individuals' citizenship requirements, that's a huge one, but talk to me about cleaning up the voter rolls, removing people who are ineligible, for instance, either people who don't live here anymore or unfortunately are deceased. Do you play a role in maintaining or at least working with the county recorder's office to help maintain the voter rolls in any capacity?
So maintaining those roles does fall within the voter registration team that reports up to the recorder's office. So I don't have oversight over that specific process.
Okay, so since that's a huge part of, again, voter confidence and election integrity, what do you mean you don't have any role? Would you want to?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Genti Rita, that is established in state statutes that assigns the roles and responsibilities for administering an election, and through then the Maricopa County Elections Operation Agreement between the recorder himself and then the Board of Supervisors. So I take my direction on what role they want to assign me.
Okay, and who do you mean they, the Board of Supervisors assigns you, or are you talking about the recorder's office?
So that would be established in the Elections Operations Agreement that's negotiated between the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and the recorder.
Okay, so that intergovernmental agreement, which has been around for a long time, you don't have the Maricopa, you're telling me that the Board of Supervisors has no role in working collaboratively with the recorder's office to make sure that our voter registration rolls are up to date?
Senator Genti Rita, I think Mr. Liddy can probably answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, these are questions that really are best presented to council, but the statute is what the statute is. Maricopa County does what the state legislature tells us to do. Certain powers are with the recorder. Certain authority over elections are with the recorder. And your specific questions are regarding the maintenance of the voter file and the procedures by which we keep that voter file up. It's important everywhere, but it's extremely important in Maricopa County, where we have very transient population, people moving within Maricopa County all the time. Each time they need to re-register to vote or update. So it's a very important question. But the operations agreement for the elections between the recorder and the Board of Supervisors was changed very recently. So it was established in the 80s. It was changed very recently. So it's not something that's been long established. And so we can get into your questions on that if you want to. But really for this particular public employee, that's one level above his area. The relationship between the Board of Supervisors and the constitutional office of the recorder and how they're going to divvy that up via statute and via delegation is really not a question that would go to this witness, but maybe to the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. I can certainly provide some background on what's happened in the past, but even I can't tell you what will happen in the future. But that is certainly an area that the legislature may want to work with the counties.
Senator Genti Rita, would you like to, I believe that the chairman is still on. Chairman Hickman, is he still, it looks like he is. Do you want to ask questions of him, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Yes. So again,
there he is like magic. You just say his name and he pops up. That's amazing.
Well, I can just say I'm enjoying the conversation for all of us, including the voter, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Good. Senator Michelle Genti Rita, please.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I am very familiar with the intergovernmental agreement between the two offices. So I'm just, again, wondering, since you had it on your slide, that you do at some level try to make sure that those voting are indeed supposed to be voting. You send out that form to make sure that people are at their said addresses. So you are involved in some capacity. Are you not involved any deeper because of that intergovernmental agreement? And if so, perhaps that should be changed. Because again, you know, making sure those who are eligible to vote, I mean, that's where kind of it all starts. So can you, Mr. Hickman, talk to me about, again, your position, or maybe even the board's position regarding your... Sure.
Let me just put, I can't talk about the board's position. The only thing I can say is the EOA that you're discussing started under Bill Gates. I'm sorry, started under the talking with our recorder, our currently elected recorder. Started under Chairman Chukri's direction, and then it was framed under Bill Gates' direction when he was chairman last year, and it was put into effect on elections for the first time on the presidential preference election, the primary, and the general election. So clearly, there are statutory mandates according to the Board of Supervisors when it comes to day of and tabulation. And clearly, there is still the statutory requirements of the elected recorder. So what you're talking about is sometimes we are identifying in this 2 years, we are identifying things either with the cooperation of the recorder to make changes, but there are also have been times where we have come to the state legislature for you guys to make changes accordingly. Do I foresee a time, do I foresee after what we've dealt with this election? Yes, I have a feeling we will be having hearings in front of your committee to continue to bring transparency to the well, transparency and confidence with the election, no matter what that is. We will have the voter has spoken, and the voter has hired a new recorder that will be sworn in January. I'm sure that our board will be having discussions with him and his authorities, but the voter has hired him to run that department, and registration is under the recorder, and the maintenance of the lists are under the recorder. So might we see each other again, or the future chairman? Yes, you might be seeing him along with the recorder if so desired and necessary. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much. And that's exactly my understanding too, that power is vested, at least right now, and has been with the recorder's office. Now, you know,
all recorders, all recorders,
yes.
all 50 recorders, of all the counties, yes.
Yes, that's important. It's not just you guys, it's all counties. Thank you, Mr. Hickman. I think that's important. You guys do take positions on these bills. So it's kind of a mixed message. You know, if I've done bills to try to update the people list, and the counties have taken positions in opposition to that. But no, here I want to ask questions about maintaining lists, and then you know, we kick it to the recorder. But in any event, I think this certainly demonstrates that, you know, we probably should look at who's responsible for maintaining these lists, because they are critical to running an election with integrity, because we do want to make sure only those who are eligible to vote are voting. So I appreciate the answers. It's been very helpful. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you. And I'd like to clarify that, because there have been bills that have been sponsored in the past to clean up Pebble and some other things. And we always hear that it's a suppression of vote. But I would suggest, and I want to know if you agree, Mr. Chairman, that keeping the voter rolls as up to date and in real time as possible is integral to us having a system that we can have confidence in. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, and I actually think the recorder, be it the soon-to-be former recorder as well as the new recorder, would probably agree also. The speed of technology, the transient nature of Maricopa County with the people that vote here, probably call for that. But that's, again, that will be up to the discussion for you. Well, not you per se in January, but Ms. Ugenti Rita as well. I'm sorry, Senator Ugenti Rita, as well as her Judiciary Committee and the legislature, in order to bring clarity and comfort. And hopefully it will be something that can be signed by the governor, and we can then affect our statutory authority upon it.
Great, thank you. And just a clarification, she will be chairing the elections committee.
Okay. I get confused. There's only 5 of us.
Right.
Have to work things. So.
Right, and the committees change every session, or every term, I should say, so we understand that. Okay, Senator Ugenti Rita, do you have any other questions? And I would certainly encourage that some of the things that we've looked at in the past that were unsuccessful, that those be revisited to try to clean up those roles. I think that's really important. Okay, Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you so much. This is not to the point. I just have a couple of statements. You know, the legislature has failed to adequately fund upgrades to outdated tabulation equipment. And I don't think we should be questioning the Board of Supervisors of Maricopa County or any about accepting money in these times of increased need for cybersecurity and updating. We all want our systems to be efficient and secure. You know, I've been on the ballot every year for the primary and general since 2008. And I can still remember the year when Eric Spencer was the election director, and he called me to tell me that our systems, there were outside foreign interests who were attempting to breach the Secretary of State's website. And that trickles down to, you know, votes cast and things. To another point, you know, I registered to vote in Arizona in 2004, and I actually had to have a, I want to say certified, notarized, and probably both birth certificate from the state of my birth. So I am very confident that only citizens, residents of Arizona are casting votes in our election. And I do have to tell you one thing. I did find someone who was registered to vote who was not a qualified person, and that person never voted. So they didn't break the law, and we did. And that was, you know, the person I found in knocking on thousands and thousands of doors. There was some, not many, more than a handful, but I believe like under 25 cases of voter fraud, and they existed. And a few cases were prosecuted, and the problem was that people, and a couple of them were senior citizens, one older case from Green Valley, of people who voted in Arizona as well as another state. And eventually they were caught. Some of them got off because they were confused and because of age, and others were prosecuted. So the rest of our election system in Arizona is very safe. It's very, very secure. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and others.
Thank you. So, Mr. Jarrett, with that statement, would you agree that you're underfunded and you weren't able to put on a secure election?
Mr. Chairman, no, I do not believe that the funding created any sort of security vulnerabilities. We are always looking to be efficient with our resources and to save the taxpayer funds in any ways. But yes, we want to have the utmost security and integrity in our elections moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And with that testimony, it's kind of a segue into one of the...
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You know, to that point, I was just, I was not, I think what I said was manipulated a little bit. What I said was, I don't fault the Board of Supervisors from voting to take money from someplace else. And obviously, I do believe they put it to good use. I wasn't suggesting anything else. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, but I believe what you stated was that the legislature has not adequately funded the tabulation systems and the election system, and so we should not be questioning the board or Maricopa about taking money to pay for those things. I believe that was your statement. So I just want to verify.
Yes.
I just want to verify with Mr. Jarrett, verify that financial considerations have not been a concern in the fairness of this election, the security of this election. So I wanted a clarification based on your statement. I don't think it was manipulated at all. I believe it was actually a direct result of your statement. Okay, Mr. Jarrett, I want to go back and talk a little bit about the federal only ballots that exist. And I understand that the Maricopa County, that your division, your department does not have anything to do with registering people to vote or maintaining those voter rolls. But you did testify earlier that there was a process when we talk about federal only ballots, and there had to be proof that they were either citizens or that they were residents. And so what I want to do is I want to read to you, if the committee will bear with me, I want to read to you right off of the Secretary of State's website regarding these elections, or regarding the federal only voter. So it says, it's not real long, a person who submits valid proof of citizenship with his or her voter registration form, regardless of the type of form submitted, is entitled to vote in all federal, state, county, and local elections in which he or she is eligible. The voter registration form otherwise must be sufficiently complete. I think that's in agreement with what you testified, that if they can prove that they're citizens, then they're able to vote on the total ballot, the complete ballot, and not just the federal form. Now, this is the next paragraph. A person is not required to submit proof of citizenship with the voter registration form, but failure to do so means the person will only be eligible to vote in federal elections, known as being a federal only voter. A federal only voter will become eligible to vote a full ballot in all federal, state, county, and local elections if he or she later provides valid proof of citizenship to the appropriate county recorder's office. Now, as I read that, that seems to me to say on the Secretary of State's website that if you can prove that you're a citizen, you can vote in a complete ballot. If you can't prove that you're a citizen, you can vote in the federal election, and you don't have to prove that you're a citizen. So please tell the committee, what is the process when somebody has a federal only ballot and they haven't proved citizenship? I know you talked about a number of things, including provisional ballots, but walk us through that again, and how does the process conform with what Secretary of State has on her website?
Mr. Chairman, can't speak on the legalities of the process, but if a Fed-only voter were to show up at a voting location to vote, they would be required to present a valid form of ID to receive that Fed-only ballot. If they did want to vote a full ballot, we would then require them to vote provisionally until they were to submit to us proof of citizenship in this country. So that's the process. And the secondary process is if they're going to vote through mail, they can't vote a Fed-only ballot and receive that through the mail first. They would have to go vote in person. That would prove their residency here in Arizona the very first time they're voting in Arizona. So that's our process for validating their identity.
But residency is different than citizenship. I can be a resident of Arizona and not a citizen of Arizona or the United States. So what I'm trying to do is to be perfectly clear for this committee and for the people of Arizona. So let me ask it very directly. Under the current statute and under the current holdings of the court and under the current Secretary of State, is there any way for a non-citizen to vote a federal only ballot?
Mr. Chairman,
Scott, that's a legal question for your counsel.
so I would refer that to our lawyers.
I'm happy to do that. I don't think it's a legal question. It's no different than the other questions we've asked on process and what you guys do, but that's fine. We're not trying to catch anybody. I'm not playing a gotcha game. So if your legal counsel can answer the question, I'm happy to talk to legal counsel. So Mr. Liddy, do you have an answer for that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I do have is my understanding of your question is about the process, and only to Maricopa County with regard to this witness. And I think he can answer that question as you posed it, not interpreting the law or the statutes or what could possibly happen in other parts of the state of Arizona, but specifically with his area of expertise and the training that our employees get. That's how I understood your question, and I think he can answer it if it's narrowed that way.
Correct. I'm not asking him to tell me the processes in other counties.
Right.
That's, as I said in my opening statement, Maricopa County is here before this committee because you are the largest county and you make up the lion's share of the majority of the votes cast in this state. So this is a good place to start. Obviously, if we had all 15 counties represented, this would be a 3-week hearing. So we're trying to get to the basis of this. So yes, within the context of what you said, this applies to Maricopa County. How do you deal with this? And my question is there a way for a non-citizen to vote a federal only ballot in Maricopa County?
So based on what we do in Maricopa County is we follow our federal laws and our state laws. And our federal laws say that if someone does not provide proof of citizenship, that they are eligible to vote a federal ballot. And we would then, if one of those voters showed up at a voting location and was able to provide us a valid ID, then we would then provide them a Fed-only ballot.
So they require ID. If they provide ID, then they can vote. They don't have to prove they're a citizen. They simply have to show you ID so that the person who's voting is the same person whose name is on the ballot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So under federal law, we are constrained under the preemption provision of the Constitution. We are constrained from stopping that, but it is very, very conceivable and very likely, in fact, I would say factual, that we have non-citizens voting a federal only ballot. Is that fair? In Maricopa County.
It's certainly fair that you can opine on that, and you have very clearly, but that's not a question posed to Mr. Jarrett.
Well, it is a question posed to Mr. Jarrett. Because,
question, please.
Absolutely. Given the fact that the federal government has preempted the state regarding those who cannot prove citizenship, and the state is bound by the preemption, it is likely, in fact, probably factual that we have non-citizens voting a federal only ballot in Maricopa County.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I can say, I can't say if it's likely, and so I can't say that that's accurate or not. I could say in Maricopa County, we had approximately 8,000 federal only voters participate in this election. 4,000 of those were UOCAVA voters, which have proven citizenship. And the remaining approximately 3,000 to 4,000 were issued a Fed-only ballot in accordance with federal statute.
Okay, so let me ask you a different way. Those 3,000 voted a federal ballot without proving citizenship. They gave ID and they proved that they were the person whose name is on the ballot, but they didn't prove citizenship. Is that correct?
That's correct, because if they would have proven citizenship, we would have given them then a full ballot.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Senator Michelle Ugenti, Rita.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on your line of questioning. Could you just tell the committee how you prove citizenship? What documentations you take?
So, Mr. Chairman, that's described in the statute, and it would be through vital records, providing social security card, birth certificates, those types of documents when they register. Also,
Mr. Chairman, and Senator Ugenti, I would ask that you would go to 16166 F, and it will give a thorough list of what Maricopa County is required to do in response exactly to your question. They're all listed right there by statute, and really we're all constrained to doing what's in the book.
I understand that. Thank you, Mr. Liddy. But remember, we do have the public watching, and this was a line of questioning that they were interested in. And so for the record, for those.
I appreciate that. For the record, I'll read them if with the indulgence of the chairman.
Certainly, Mr. Liddy, please do.
16166F, the county recorder shall reject any applications for registration that is not accompanied by satisfactory evidence of United States citizenship. Satisfactory evidence of citizenship shall include any of the following. And it talks about the number for a driver's license, talks about a legible photocopy of the applicant's birth certificate, a legible photocopy of a United States passport, a presentation to the county recorder of the applicant's United States naturalization documents, other documents or methods of proof that are established pursuant to the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, the applicant's Bureau of Indian Affairs card number, tribal treaty number, or tribal enrollment number. Notwithstanding Section F of this section, any person who is registered in this state on the effective date of this amendment to this section is deemed to have provided satisfactory evidence of citizenship and shall not be required to resubmit evidence of citizenship unless the person is changing voter registration from one county to another. For the purposes of this section, proof of voter registration from another state or county is not satisfactory evidence of citizenship. A person who modifies voter registration records for the new residence ballot shall not be required to submit evidence of citizenship. After a person has submitted satisfactory evidence of citizenship, the county recorder shall indicate this information in the person's permanent voter file. I think that covers it, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Liddy, that's great. I appreciate that. And that just triggered one question about IDs. Does a college ID, is that, in your opinion, a sufficient form of ID?
To prove citizenship.
Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman and Senator Genti-Rita, I would ask that he answer that as to the practice of Maricopa County as opposed to rendering a legal opinion.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Genti-Rita, so in the Elections Procedures Manual, it describes what is an acceptable ID, and it specifically calls out that college IDs are not allowed because they do not have, even though they're issued by a form of government, they do not have an address on the face or on the back of the cards. They cannot be used to be an acceptable ID in Maricopa County.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's my understanding. And if a university were to add an address to the ID, would that change its eligibility?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Genti-Rita, I'd work with my legal counsel to determine whether we would then add that to our programming of the check-in stations to be used as an acceptable ID.
And if I may, I think that's really a question for the legislature or the court. That sort of question, it's an outstanding question and a probative question, would never be unilaterally answered by the Board of Supervisors or the Elections Department on its own.
Great. Thank you to both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Since this is my line of questioning, I'll go back to, and I'm just going to make a statement. I appreciate the fact that you are obligated to follow the federal law on this issue, but I would formally and publicly call on the Congress to change that law. That in and of itself undermines the integrity of the elections that we have when we have non-citizens voting in elections in the United States. That is harmful, detrimental, undercuts, and it is outrageous that we have that kind of a mandate from Congress. In my opinion, actually, it challenges the very sovereignty of this country, in my opinion. Okay, I don't know if we have any more questions for Mr. Jarrett. Are there any questions? Hearing none, Mr. Jarrett, thank you. I hope you'll stand by in case we have any to go back to. But I'm certainly very grateful for your willingness to be here. I'm grateful for your cooperation. I'm grateful for the depth that you went to in expressing the process, the way you try to maintain integrity within the process, and we're grateful for the things that you do. So thank you very much. Okay, I think we're going to move on to a presentation by Mr. Liddy, who I believe is counsel for the Board of Supervisors, Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. So Mr. Liddy, please wow us with your presentation.
If I may, I have one question for you, Mr. Chairman, and that is in my desire to give this august body my full attention, I would request a brief 5-minute break so I no longer have to compete with my bladder.
Understood. Understood. We will recess for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Stand by, everyone. We will be recessing along with the hearing for 5 minutes.
think we have a quorum, so Jake, let's go ahead and set up. Tell me when we're ready.
All right.
Okay, BLR family, they're setting up and they should be returning very shortly. So please continue to stand by.
Okay, I'm told we're back live. You can gavel back in, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The Judiciary Committee is called back to order. So with that, Mr. Liddy, if you are prepared, we would love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and every member of this committee, and by extension, every member of the Arizona legislature for providing such robust statutes with such great detail that have enabled our county, as well as others, in order to put on elections in which people can have a great deal of confidence. And we're going to share some of the information that we've learned over the past 40 days as it's been tested. First of all, as you know, I'm Tom Liddy, and I work for Alistair Adele, the County Attorney of Maricopa County, and I am with our entire Civil Division office. We represent the Board of Supervisors, as well as the reporter, as well as all the other elected officers. And with regard to this hearing, the employees, 58 full-time employees of Maricopa County who put on the elections every year. And I've been asked by my client, the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, to assist this council, as I have been over the past week through a variety of teleconferences, and as we pledged to do in the future, as this body and the future elections committee works to examine past practices to make determinations if they want to make changes to the legislation. And we pledge our availability to assist in that regard. But I'm not a fact witness in that everything that I learn with regard to my representation of my clients, but I am here to help to the extent that I can provide that for you. You obviously are very ably represented by your own counsel, and I won't be giving you any legal advice. That wouldn't be appropriate, and you don't need that. I will say, let me just start by saying that I have been working in election law since 1995, when there was quite a change in the House of Representatives, and my particular party, before I was working for the government, took over the Capitol, and I was asked up to the Capitol. And I practiced election law in many different states, nearly 20, over the better part of 30 years. And I can say with a great deal of confidence that the statutory framework provided to the counties in Arizona, specifically provided to our county, Maricopa County, is very strong, very robust. And my hat's off to the persons, the legislators, currently and in years past, who've worked so hard and so knowledgeably to give such detailed directions to the county. So my hat's off to you. And with that, all the county does, all our clients do, is follow the law. We don't decide the best way to run an election. Our employees don't make decisions and, hey, maybe this is better than that. No, we don't do it that way. We do it according to the legislature and for one very specific purpose. Is that is this great experiment we have in American Republican constitutional framework provided, as it was cited by this chairman at the very beginning of this hearing, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. It's the United States government recognizes the power of the state legislature to write the rules for the elections. Not the governor, not the Secretary of State, certainly not boards of supervisors, not even the Congress, although they dabble around the edges on federal elections, that sort of thing. But it's the state legislature that does that. And we recognize that awesome power and that foresight by the framers. And we take it very seriously. We don't do free form in Maricopa County. We abide by the rules as stated by the Arizona legislature. So as we go through the process, and you've heard in great detail from Mr. Jarrett how we go through the process, in particular this election, November 3rd, 2020, I just ask that you bear that in mind. Every single thing we do is informed by Title 16 as written by this legislature. And our county does not have the liberty to deviate from that. So with that, I do want to say that if the statute allows for criticism, obviously that's fine, and for contests, and there have been contests. It also allows for lawsuits, and they've had lawsuits. And under the Article 3 power, the rules are set by the courts on how those lawsuits run, and they've been tested a little bit in the last couple of weeks, and we're going to get ready to go through some of that. So there are rules for making pleadings in court, and there's rules for admissibility of evidence, and all of that stuff came into play as this variety of lawsuits went through. I think we've had 7 different lawsuits, 8 or 9 different decisions. We have 2 right now before the United States Supreme Court. We expect those to be resolved relatively recently. But I want to touch on some of them because I think it will provide this committee with some additional information that it may find useful as it approaches its constitutional duty to address potential changes in the future. So first of all, we've had 4 different Superior Court judges and 7 Arizona Supreme Court justices and 1 federal district court judge who've all looked at these claims. Every single one of them have found the pleadings, the claims of errors in the part of Maricopa County to be lacking significantly. And that's interesting. It would be unanimous, especially in the Arizona Supreme Court. I ask that you bear that in mind. So in these particular slides, we're going to cover 5 of those cases. And in these cases, we represent the Board of Supervisors, Maricopa County, and the county reporter. So the plaintiffs change from time to time. Let's go over to one of them. So this is Trump v. Hobbs. The allegation was that we've heard a lot about Sharpies. We heard a lot about green buttons as well. The green buttons were a characteristic of the precinct tabletop tabulators used, but specifically Sharpie markers bleeding through the paper ballots and causing a rejection of ballots brought on by alleged erroneous reading of overvotes. I think as you heard through the testimony of the presentation of Mr. Jarrett, that the ballots were offset so that bleed through would not create an erroneous vote count on the other side, which of course would likely be an overvote. We had a record rate, a very low rate of overvotes in November 3rd, 2020 election. And so that evidence doesn't stand up. But the case, we had testimony that there were witnesses who were worried about whether or not their vote was counted. And one particular witness came forward and she testified that she was fine with the process and very comfortable with it. She got her ballot, she checked in with the site book, voted it, and put it into the tabulator. And she found no indicia at all within the vote center that there was any problem. But it wasn't until after she left, when she spoke to some people, her words, and to some lawyers, and specifically to her father, that she began to get weird whether or not her ballot was counted. Of course, as you can understand, the court wouldn't find that evidence of a problem with the tabulator. She didn't see any problem with the vote center at all. It was outside opinions or suggestions, what have you. Another individual was asked, he came forward in that particular lawsuit, and he said he didn't see anything wrong either, but he just didn't trust machines much. Okay, that's fine. He's entitled to that. I get it. But in Arizona, we're required to count ballots by machine because the legislature mandates it. And the reason the legislature mandates it is there's an extraordinary amount of evidence out there that when counting ballots, but specifically large numbers, very large numbers, we counted 2.1 million in this election. Machines are much more accurate than humans are. Humans just make more mistakes. So in its wisdom, we don't have any discretion on that. We have to count them by machines. And evidence of an individual just not trusting machines much was not found to be very probative by the court in that regard. Let's go to the next slide if we can.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Leach, you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. Mr. Liddy, good to see you again. Mr. Liddy, you talked about the folks that that seemingly had problems after they left the voting place. Did you have any testimony in this or other suits where the testimony was that in fact their ballot had to be put into a machine several times and kept getting rejected, and finally went through or didn't go through? There seems to be a lot of that allegation moving around. Did you have an opportunity to discuss that, or did the prosecutor plaintiff bring it up?
I don't know if in that particular case the plaintiff brought it up. I believe a witness did bring it up, but that is an issue that has come up in a variety of cases and even outside the courtroom. It's very common when someone feeds in a ballot for an initial have to go in initially. Often it goes in twice. After twice, sometimes it's put into what's called the third drawer, and then it's counted by a much better, much more robust machine down at McTech. But I would not dispute that on many different occasions when people go on election day to vote and they put in a ballot, that it is not automatically counted the first time. The vast majority are, but it is not unusual for one to not be counted the first time and need to be reinserted a second time, and even a third time. But often at that point, if there's the voter will be given an opportunity, there was testimony on this, to look at the ballot, make a determination as to whether that person wanted to spoil the ballot and start again, go back to the site book, check in, get a new ballot, or the ballot could be counted down at Central County. So I think to answer your question, and I don't know with regard to that particular case, I think it was brought up, but it has been something that we've heard.
So,
That answer your question, Senator?
Let me go just a little bit further if I could, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Liddy, so now my ballot has gone in twice, and the person at the machine decides that it needs to go in the third drawer, and I walk out or I stay because the chain of custody has now been broken. How am I assured that my ballot got counted?
Well, we've gone through those procedures with the previous witness. We can do that again, but the decision to place
to that point, Mr. Liddy, I don't think we walked through that. I don't think we walked through that. We walked through.
Senator, I would ask that you allow me to finish answering the question.
Let's not talk over each other. So let Mr. Liddy continue.
So the decision as to whether to put the ballot in the third drawer is that of the voter, or whether it's to spoil the ballot is that of the voter. It's not the decision of the poll worker. So now your question, Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
you. Senator Ugenti-Rita.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Farnsworth. Mr. Liddy, what is the instruction that the poll worker gives the voter in that circumstance? Are they provided with an option? For example, does the poll worker say, hey, we're having trouble feeding it through the system. You have the ability to walk away if you want. We'll put it to the side. Or are they told something else? What's the instruction in that particular instance?
The instruction is, and this was consistent throughout all of this litigation, that the poll worker always instructs that the decision is the voters. That's the training, and we had a lot of testimony taken about the training manuals and the training instruction. The blank ballot is given to the voter. The voter fills it out. The voter goes to the tabulation machine. The voter puts it in. If the tabulation machine doesn't accept it after a couple tries, the voter is told the voter has choices. The voter has to take those decisions, him or herself, and that can be to spoil the ballot.
Okay.
And then it's put into a particular envelope, and then they go back through the process again, and they get another ballot. Or they can look at the ballot, examine it, and find out if there is an overvote. The machine itself will have a display, and they can look at that and look at the vote, and they can decide if they want to vote it as is or not. It's always the choice of the voter.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Liddy, what I'm saying is, so they have the option of saying, look, I want to get out of here. This is taking too long. And then if there was a concern with the ballot, like if there was an overvote, that then ballot would be dealt with later and go through the adjudication process to determine intent?
Well, I think the choice would be, as I stated, to either spoil the ballot and do another one, but as you said, that could take a long time because there are many different races to vote on. Or it could be to vote it as is, or it could be, it goes in, if the machine will not count it, it goes into what's called drawer number 3, and then it goes down to, and the chain of custody is maintained, it goes down to McTech, where they have central counters that are much more robust, and it would be counted in those machines. If it got to the point where those machines would not count it, then it would perhaps go into the system where it is examined, voter intent is determined by the board, and the ballot is duplicated. And then counted through the machine.
Okay, very good. So it looks like there's 3 options. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What would be different between the machines at a vote center and these machines you're talking about that are much more sensitive or robust at MTech that would then be able to read the ballot that could otherwise not be read at the vote center?
Well, again, this is not my area of expertise, but if you will, at a election day voting place, be it a vote center as it was in 2020, November 2020, or the precinct polling place in previous years, there is a tabulator there that is smaller, it's more mobile, and it's not as powerful a machine as the very large ones that can count more rapidly and more accurately and count via stacks that they have at McTech. So it's just a different machine and it's much more robust. The technical reasons for that are beyond my area of expertise.
Okay, that's interesting.
I will tell you there are 9 of them, 9 of the big ones at McTech, and there are hundreds and hundreds of the precinct-based tabulators.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But Mr. Liddy, you're not suggesting that either one of those machines is more likely to have a false vote. In other words, an incorrect vote. It's just the robustness of the counting.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Members, if you have a question, it really helps if you would raise your digital hand because I can monitor that on the screen. So Senator Borelli, I have no idea what that is that you just put that. Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a hand. I'm not sure. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Liddy, by any chance you don't happen to know what the ballot adjudication rate is for the mail-in ballots?
The ballot adjudication rate for mail-in ballots. By that, you mean the total number of mail-in ballots that went through the adjudication process divided by the total number of mail-in ballots?
Well, how many adjudicated mail-in ballots were there?
I do not, but Mr. Jarrett may.
Okay, I'll wait. He can
Oh, it's okay. He just provided to me.
Okay.
That rate is 11.27. 11.27, and that includes the write-in ballots that obviously could not be counted by the machine.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse, I'm sure, got a lot of ballots, got a lot of votes this year. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, Mr. Liddy, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next slide I have up is Arizona Republican Party versus Fontes et al., and that et al. Is Maricopa County and the Board of Supervisors. And there were claims brought, let me see if we can get it here. The allegation was that Maricopa County improperly performed the statutory required hand count. And this was a discussion that came up earlier during Mr. Jarrett's presentation. And that is that the law provided to us by the legislature requires a form of audit during the process, which is referred to as the 2% hand count. And as was elicited during his presentation, the statute sets 2% as a floor. There is some discretion there on the part of the county, which is rare, and that is the county could choose to do 3% or 4% or 5%, but they may not do less than 2%. And in the November 3, 2020 election, the county elected to go the 2% hand count. Now, this is the statute that says the 2% hand count on it must be 2% of the precincts. Now, in this state, we have the ability to vote by precincts. Now, that ability is under attack, and we are in a lawsuit. We went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit said that we had to use vote centers, that we could not use precincts. Of course, that's being appealed. And the people of Arizona are very ably being represented by our Attorney General up at the United States Supreme Court. In the meantime, the county chose to go with vote centers because of the emergency of COVID-19. And let me spend a little bit of time on that. The county had spent a lot of money and a lot of time preparing to vote for all the elections, the presidential preference, the primary, and the general election of November 3, 2020. And then COVID-19 hit hard in March and started to grow. And our county's elections department was inundated with phone calls from persons whom we regularly rely on to man the polling places. These are the poll workers you see every time you go and vote on election day. Incredibly dedicated people. They were fearful that they might contract COVID if they were there and the voters were flowing in and out. At the exact same time, the county was inundated by calls of our partners in elections, such as private buildings, churches, and what have you, where we place precinct voting places, polling places. They didn't want to do it in 2020 because of COVID. So we had to make a change. And the change was recommended that we go use the technology for vote centers, and that's why that change was done. And so the state statute allows for voting centers. It didn't require a change in the law. I think I have that cite for you. It's Title 16, 411B. B as in Bravo. It authorizes counties to use vote centers. So there was no need to go to the legislature at that time to get specific authority to do it. And the statute also authorizes the Secretary of State to put together the election procedures manual. And in it, it was provided that the 2% hand count could be done polling places at vote centers rather than precincts. And it was that decision, not one made by the county, but that decision that was challenged in this suit. And of course, our defense of it was successful. And the challenge saying that the 2% hand count of vote centers rather than precincts, that was unlawful, that failed in the courts. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Mr. Liddy, we're going to pause for a second. Senator Ugenti Rita has a question, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Farnsworth. Could you just take me back? Because you made a comment that voting by precinct is under attack.
Yes.
And what lawsuit are you referencing?
It is called, help me out here, team. It's the
Democratic National Committee
versus
Hobbs.
Okay, it's Democratic National Committee versus Secretary of State Hobbs.
And where is that in the courts?
It's now up at the United States Supreme Court. This case was formerly known as the Feldman case. It's been going on for quite some time, and it's an attempt by the Democratic National Committee to reduce the authority of the people of Arizona and the legislature of Arizona to allow it to run its own elections via precinct.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to get.
If I could take the theory is that right now, the obvious benefit of voting by precinct is a voter lives in one particular place, and there's a certain style of ballot that's custom made for you and your neighbors. And it not only has the president, the vice president, and the federal offices, but also your state legislature, your congressperson, and there may be a school board issues, all that sort of thing. And so we in other states require people to go and vote at their precinct. And there's obvious benefits for that. Well, the downside of that is some folks work far away from home, and they may be hourly employees. And their employers say, okay, it's election day, I'll give you an hour, go vote. And they have to travel quite a distance to get back to the polling place. And if there's a line, they're
get worried that they're not going to be able to get back to work in time, so they don't vote. That's the allegation that's made by the DNC and others. And so that's the challenge. It's access to balloting, ease of voting. If somebody goes to a vote center, you've got these new printers that were referred to in Mr. Jarrett's testimony, that you go in, you go to the site book, you say who you are, you show your ID, they look up where you live, and then they print out live right then and there a ballot that's the style for where you live, regardless of where you're voting. So you could live in Scottsdale and vote in Glendale, that sort of thing.
Okay. I thought is this the one attached to the ballot harvesting?
I'm sorry, that's exactly right. I was just getting ready to tell you, it's the exact same lawsuit. That's the other side of it, is ballot harvesting. We have a law here in Arizona that prohibits ballot harvesting for election security reasons, and that is part of the exact same lawsuit.
Okay, I thought that the issue with that was voting out of precinct and whether those votes were counted. Not necessarily an attack on precinct voting, but on whether if you voted out of precinct, you could indeed still tabulate that vote. But
that is certainly part of it. It was my word formulation, and it is my opinion that it's an attack on precinct voting. I'm sure not everyone agrees, but I do.
I think that's an important clarification, because I don't interpret that as an attack on precinct voting, but to clarify what votes count if you were to vote outside of precinct. And if you voted outside of precinct, have you now violated your eligibility, I guess, and your vote shouldn't count? I think that's where that lawsuit was, but I'm not as familiar with it as you are, but.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Genti Rita, you are not incorrect in that aspect of the lawsuit that you raised, but the Ninth Circuit has made a decision to remove from Arizona and its legislature the ability to vote by precinct. And that is what I consider an attack on our ability to vote by precinct. So everything that you've stated about the lawsuit is correct. It's that additional part that was caused by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that I consider an attack on our state's ability to do precinct voting. If you want to disagree with that formulation, that's fine.
No, I'm just getting clarity. So they literally, I read it, but they removed the ability for Arizona to conduct its elections by precinct?
They're trying to.
Okay, interesting. All right, I think that's interesting. Okay, I'll go back and review it. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none. Mr. Liddy, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aguilera et al. Versus Fontes et al. Okay, so that Aguilera is a voter, and there are other voters part of this lawsuit. Fontes, as we all know, the Maricopa County Recorder et al. Would be Maricopa County and the Board of Supervisors and the members. The allegation was the plaintiffs claimed that they voted, but feared that their ballots were not correctly tabulated. And they requested that the court order that Maricopa County allow them to go down to McTech and vote again and watch their votes be tabulated. The court found that the plaintiffs both cast their ballots in accordance, obviously, with the statutes and the procedures, but they would prefer the process to be different. They wanted to observe the tabulation of their ballots, but it's impossible to open the ballot box to identify and locate these plaintiffs' ballots and for review, or to change those ballots, and equally impossible for either plaintiff to cast another ballot, as doing so would be against the law. So that's what that vote was about. And I believe these were 2 or 3 issues. One of them, yeah. So one of them was a voter who put the ballot in the tabletop tabulator, the precinct-based tabulator, twice, and then it was put into the drawer number 3, and then it went down to McTech, where those more robust machines would count it. So it did comply with the law. It was machine counted. This particular voter said, but I wanted to watch it be counted, and there's no legal requirement for the county to allow, to provide for each and every of the 2.1 million voters to watch their particular ballot go through the tabulation machine at McTech. And so we prevailed in that lawsuit as well. There was, I will mention this, in this lawsuit, this was the first lawsuit that we had that mentioned Dominion or the Dominion voting systems. And plaintiffs brought forward a witness who has 20 years of experience in elections in Texas, and 5 years ago had done a report on a Dominion system that was used in Texas. And that, of course, that system is not the system that we have. The system we have that machines we're leasing is different than that. And so that report was 5 years old. The different system wasn't probative to the question in front of the court. So it was a finding of note that the problems that allegedly occurred in Texas 5 years ago are not the problems that were alleged here, because they're different systems. And so that, I just mentioned that because it was the first time. There was no evidence to support that any voters were disenfranchised in that case. Any questions on that before I move on?
Any questions? Hearing none, please continue.
The next is Ward v. Jackson et al. And now this is a case that was brought by one one candidate to be on the slate of presidential electors versus all the other members of the opposing slate. So this would be the Trump proposed slate of electors, which was on the ballot November 3rd, 2020, versus the Biden slate. And this was an election challenge. And they said that that there were erroneous count of votes and that the wrong person was declared the winner. And the theory there was that because the law mandates that all ballots be machine counted here in Arizona, and any ballot that cannot be counted by a machine, whether it be on election day tabletop or down at the McTech Center in the more robust machines, or mail-in ballots that come in and can't be voted, they have to go to the duplication boards that we heard referred to by Mr. Jarrett earlier. Now, some ballots always have to be duplicated. We do provide ballots that are very much enlarged for people that have difficulty seeing small font. And those very large ballots can never go through the machines and always have to be duplicated. Also, the overseas ballots, and there were just shy of 10,000 of those. They come in, according to federal law, via a specifically protected portal. And those have to be reproduced onto a ballot that can be counted in the machine. And then any ballot that was either misprinted because it went into the printer askew, or there's a stray mark on it, or a tear, or somebody spilled coffee, or sometimes people write notes on them, and the machines just can't count that. So all those are duplicated. And the allegation was that the duplication process was flawed. And because it was flawed, that somehow the ballots for the particular candidate in this case would have been President Donald Trump, the thousands of votes for Trump were not counted. And so this is the one where the court ordered us to test, and we went in and we did a random sampling of 100 of those ballots. And we ran through that, and we had teams of Republicans and Democrats and observers from the Secretary of State's office. And we just went through them one by one in a manner where everybody had plenty of time to look at each one. And in that first review of 100, we found 2 ballots in which there were mistakes made, 2 out of 100. So a 2% error rate. And personally, I think 100 ballots out of 27,869 is too small a sample size. Well, the plaintiffs also thought that. And so did the chairman of the board of the supervisors at Maricopa County. And so we went into court, and the plaintiff, who their attorney said, Your Honor, we want more. We would love to see 2,500 more looked at. And on behalf of my client, I said, that's fine. We'd love to look at more too. But I had done some math on my own because we just watched him do the 100. And truth be told, the random selection process actually takes a little bit of time. Once you start going through the ballots, you can get moving pretty well. So I calculated that it would take us 3 days to get through 2,500. And I informed the court it would take 3 days. It was possible we could have done it in 2.5, but in order to do it, I needed 3 days. Well, the plaintiff had asked for 3 extra days to continue the hearing. I guess they figured the same thing. They can speak for themselves. So I told the court we'd be happy to look at 2,500 more in addition to the 100 we already looked at, if he granted the motion by the plaintiffs to delay the hearing and go start again on that Monday. Well, the judge denied that. His reasoning was, whatever the outcome, somebody's going to appeal. We got to give the Arizona Supreme Court time. So we committed to heading right down McTech and starting right away. And truth be told, even before that, I'd already been on the phone to Mr. Jarrett, and we were already making arrangements to get it started. Now, there's a bit of logistics involved there because you got to get the Republicans in, you got to get the Democrats in, you got to get the Secretary of State in. You also have to get the employees in. And we set up 3 different stations to do it. And we did there and we got rolling. Now, I had Mr. Jarrett working very hard supervising this and also protecting all those ballots. These are live ballots. And by law, there's certain protections we have to have. And of course, I was there as well as Mr. Valenzuela. Now, because the court had denied the motion to continue the hearing, and we had to go to court right away the next day, we couldn't go deep into the night and do any more. We had to stop at one point because we had to take what we found. And what we did find was 7 more mistakes, 2 of which hurt Biden, and 6 of which hurt Trump. And we needed to make those into exhibits. We needed to prepare our witnesses. So we had to stop it slightly after 6:30 in the evening so that we could work, late into the night preparing for the hearing, which is what we did. But we were able to review 1,526 additional ballots. So you tack that on with the 100, we got a sample size now of 1,626, which is any statistician will tell you is a significant sample size of a total universe of 27,869 ballots that were duplicated. And so we looked at those, and as anyone who's worked on elections or as a statistician will tell you, that what you're looking for, you're always going to find mistakes, human mistakes, but the mistakes should go one way and then the other way, then one way, the other, maybe 2 for one and 1 for the other. And the larger sample you get, the more you're going to approach 0. And that's what we saw. We saw that instead of only 2% error rate and all the errors harming President Trump, what we found is that error rate went down to about 0.5%. And the 100% error rate for Trump started to decrease. But we stopped it at 1626. I don't think it's good math to do an extrapolation at that frozen part at 1626, but nevertheless, we did that, and we made an assumption that if all of the remainder of the 27,869 ballots had the same rate of errors, it fell to Trump and to Biden at the same way, you would end up with 102.8 ballots, more votes rather for Trump. Of course, you can't have 0.8 of a vote. So that would be something less than 103. So I think you could say with a high degree of confidence that had we been able to go through all 27,869 of those ballots, you would find no more than 102 additional votes for Trump. And, you could find an extra 60, 70, 80 for Biden. I don't know. We didn't do it. But in terms of the law for contests in Arizona statute, you have to be able to demonstrate that you find errors, and the fear of the error could change the outcome of the election. And 102 votes or 103 votes, if you will, could not make up the difference of the 10,400 and some differential between the 2 presidential slates. And so for that reason, the plaintiffs did not meet their burden, and Maricopa County was shown to have complied with the law and have an accurate vote count on that. So if there are any questions on that, I will take them. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next slide.
Any questions? Senator Ugenti Rita with the digital hand up and the real
Yes.
hand.
Both. Yes, I did both, just to, cover my bases.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your testimony regarding the statistical accuracy of this last election, but there were either, mistakes, errors, anomalies. I'm just really born out of sheer curiosity. What does that look like? Is that mistake on behalf of the equipment reading the adjudicated ballot incorrectly? And I don't even know if we're talking about adjudicated ballots or just the ballot incorrectly, or what would you contribute those mistakes, I know that they're small in nature, but what would they be contributed to? Maybe human error? What do they look like?
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Gentile Rita, excellent question. Yes, the answer is yes, human error. Through these processes, we found that there were 0 errors in this sample, this 1,626 that were made by the machine. Of the total errors of 9, we found that 1 was made by the voter, and that even if that error had been identified, it wouldn't have changed the tally. But of the other 8, those were made by the humans that were duplicating the ballots in accordance with the statute.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Liddy, so what does that look like for the adjudicated ballots? I'm thinking, it's my understanding you've got like a Republican person and a Democrat there that both have to agree. So how do they agree to and make a mistake?
They're humans, Homo sapiens, Earthlings. That's how, or as one plaintiff said, real humans. That's exactly how it would happen. You're exactly right. We would have 2 people plus 1 supervisor, a total of 3, and they had to be of 2 different parties, and the supervisor is an independent. And they look at them, and I can describe for you what I saw, and I can't remember all 9 of them, but one of them was a ballot, which I believe was for Trump.
Okay.
And then when doing the duplication process, it looked like just as, I don't know if you can see my hand, but just as my hand is here, if I were filling the oval right here in Trump, I might hit with this knuckle right here, the oval that's 4 below for write-in. And so the voter had clearly voted for Trump. I'm hopeful that you can still hear me. So the voter had clearly voted for Trump. And then it appeared to me that this knuckle here hit and voted and filled the oval for the write-in, but there was no write-in. So when that went through the machine, that was counted as an overvote. Right, so the error was made in duplicating the ballot because it was a vote for Trump and then a filled in oval at the write-in, but there was no write-in.
Oh, wait a minute. So where is the human error? So the machine kicked it out as an overvote.
Well, the human error was when duplicating the ballot, filling in the ovals 2 different places on the presidential slate where it should have been 1. The voter did not make the error. The voter voted correctly.
So
it was the human duplication.
So you're telling me a Republican and a Democrat and a supervisor saw that, and the 3 of them agreed, wait a minute, this is what did they count that as, a non-vote, or like didn't count it? And then you're telling me someone in the court process was like, oh my God, look at that mistake. And then who is that person that gets to decide that whoever adjudicated that ballot was wrong? Like, how would they know?
Mr. Chairman, compound and complex. No, I think you asked me 3 different questions. Let me start with the first one. I wasn't there, so I don't know what the 3 people were thinking, but my theory would be they didn't see it. They thought they did it correctly, but they did not. And we know they did not because the court allowed us to go look at it and we found the error. Right? So I don't think they made the error, looked at it and said, that's okay. They didn't. They were not aware, I'm sure. I can't be 100% sure, but I wasn't there. They made the error, didn't catch it.
So let me ask, what's the error? How did those adjudicators, how did they count that ballot? Like a non-vote because it was?
No, let me back up a little bit, go through the steps. So the voter filled out the ballot. One I'm talking about right now, the voter did the correct thing. This particular voter voted for Donald Trump.
Okay.
Now the adjudication team looked at it and said, the ballot's damaged, the machine won't count it. By law, we have to hand duplicate it. By law. For write-in, but there is no write-in. Now, by law, the ballot has to be counted by the machine. They don't know that they made the mistake. If they knew they made the mistake, they would have done it again and just been a vote for Trump. And then it goes in the machine, and the machine counts it, as it accurately would if it were an actual overvote, as an overvote. So where it should have been 1 vote for Trump, it was 0 votes for Trump and 0 votes for Biden. That's what happened.
Okay, because that adjudication team accidentally counted it as a vote for Trump and a vote for a write-in, and then that couldn't be counted.
Yeah, and Senator, it's not an adjudication, even it's a board duplication or
Okay,
ballot
wrong.
duplication board.
Board, okay, tell me that again.
It's a ballot duplication board.
Right, but what they're doing though is determining the intent. That board though is determining the
That's
intent
right.
of the voter. Okay, then voting that, let's call clean ballot and then feeding it into the system so that it's counted.
And technically, they don't count it, the machine counts it.
Okay, thank you. And then the machine counts it. Okay.
So you would ask me about that one, and there's one, and others had, different mistakes on it. I saw one that was supposed to be a vote for the Libertarian candidate, and it was duplicated as a vote for the Libertarian candidate, and I can't remember if it was Biden or Trump, and that also went through as an overvote and should not have. There's
Oh, wow.
another that had somebody had voted, and I'm surmising, I don't know, but trying to correct it, made a bunch of holes in the oval, and then made another vote. And then when you duplicated that, the duplicating board wouldn't know it, but it was read by the machine as an overvote.
Okay.
That ballot should have been spoiled. And so there were a total of 9.
Okay.
Any further questions, Senator?
No, learning a lot. Thank you.
That's why we're here.
So you to give her. All right, Mr. Liddy, please continue.
Okay, and then the next slide I have is, did I do this one? Woodby Jackson? Oh, I'm sorry. Same case, Woodby Jackson. This went up to the Arizona Supreme Court. It was appealed. And the plaintiffs asked the court to reverse the lower court's judgment and remand the case back down to the Superior Court to allow for continued inspection of ballots, which would be a larger sample size. Remember, we started with 100, and I don't think anybody was happy with that. Too small. It's not a statistically significant sample. 100 out of 27,869. We went to 1,626, and that is a statistically significant sample. The court found that the challenge fails to present any evidence of misconduct, illegal votes, or that the Biden electors did not, in fact, receive the highest number of votes in office. And those 3 things were required by the law in order for the plaintiff to prevail, let alone establish any degree of fraud or sufficient error rate that would undermine the certainty of the election results. That was the finding unanimously by the Arizona Supreme Court. And I would just remind this committee that was examining the total universe of 27,869 ballots that were duplicated. That's not all 2.1 million ballots.
Okay.
That case is currently on appeal in the United States Supreme Court. Next, we go to Bauer versus Ducey and Hobbs. So this is a lawsuit that was brought by the slate of Republican electors against the governor and against the Secretary of State. And all of the allegations, or the vast majority of the allegations, were about alleged problems, allegations on the internet and what have you about Maricopa County. So we moved to intervene because, of course, with Mr. Jarrett and the board, we're the ones that have the knowledge of the evidence that the court would need to adjudicate that. So our motion to intervene was permitted. We got into the case, and this was a federal case. This is the only one that was in the federal court. So the federal district judge ordered us, which is not unusual, happens in every federal case, to get together. And under Rule 26, there's a broad discovery, and we have to start sharing information. This, Perry Mason stuff with a surprise at the last minute, that doesn't happen. That's not real. What's real is that the court's order and the Supreme Court has propounded rules that require lawyers to cooperate and share evidence. So what was really interesting about this case is it was based largely on the claims of an unknown witness. And the witness, in discovery, you have to give the names of your witnesses, and you have to give a witness list, and you have to say what they're going to say. And what we were told by the plaintiffs was that they weren't going to give us the name of one of the witnesses, but they would refer to him by the nom de guerre Spider. Wow, that's pretty intriguing, Spider, huh? That's pretty cool, except we, according to the rules of civil procedure, we have a due process right to know this guy's real name. So we actually got kind of contested there. They didn't want to give us the name, but the allegation was that Spider was a military intelligence expert, and that he had looked at the operations, presumably inside Maricopa County, because that's what the lawsuit was about, and he had found all kinds of problems. So I told opposing counsel, we can keep his name under seal, but we got to know who this guy is, because we got to look at his background to find out the veracity of what he's saying. We have to be able to cross-examine this guy, find out, present evidence to the court to weigh his credibility. Well, they wouldn't give us the name, and we weren't too happy about that. We complained about that with the judge and filed a motion to dismiss. Well, it turns out after the fact that this is actually significant, because this claim, we prevailed on this claim as well. But this is also up in the Supreme Court. And turns out that Spider is Joshua Merritt. And Joshua Merritt was a soldier in the United States Army, but he was not a military intelligence expert. He was a four-wheeled vehicle mechanic at an Army base down in Texas. And he had deployed, served his country honorably, had done well, and served as a mechanic. But he wasn't a military intelligence expert at all. And so he made lots of claims about how he had examined what was going on in Maricopa County and found out that China and Iran were involved and whole kinds of problems. And we didn't even have a chance to question this guy. But the plaintiffs, the court ruled that the plaintiffs failed to provide the court with factual support for their extraordinary claims, that they have wholly failed to establish that they have any standing for the court to consider them. Allegations that find favor in the public sphere of gossip and innuendo cannot be a substitute for earnest pleading and procedure in a federal court. They most certainly cannot be the basis for upending the 2020 general election here in Arizona. And I think I'd like to make this point, Mr. Chairman, and that we've said all along very consistently that we don't make up our own rule. We follow the rules in Title 16 provided to us by the legislature, who's empowered by the United States Constitution to write the rules for this election, and we respect that awesome power of the legislature. Similarly, under Article 3 of the United States Constitution, the courts set up rules for the admissibility of evidence, the requirements for discovery, the exchange of information, so that we can find justice. And in this particular claim, the plaintiffs wanted to completely circumvent the rules established by the court in a manner in which we can seek justice. And this legislature, in its wisdom, provided for contests in the statute. The rules, you can't file a contest until the election's been certified, and then there's a window of 5 days. And then these contests get adjudicated in court, but they have to be adjudicated in sync with the mandatory rules of evidence and rules of procedure that are established by the Article 3 branch. And there wasn't even the slightest effort to do that on the part of the plaintiffs. And so that case failed, and it's up in the Supreme Court, and I would expect it to fail as well. So let me go one more. Can we skip? Let's go to the next.
Let me, Mr. Liddy, Senator Gray, do you have a question?
Well, actually, I raised my hand, but I might have misheard, but I thought Mr. Liddy said Bowers versus, and I just wanted, for those that might be listening, that may think that that was our House Speaker, that it's actually Boyer. And so I just didn't want anybody that might have been listening to actually think it was the Speaker. So that was just a clarification. I might have misheard you, but I just wanted that clarified.
Well, I appreciate your clarification.
Chairman, Senator Gray, thank you very much. It's Boyer, B-O-W-Y-E-R, B-O-W-Y-E-R. And while we're on the point of clarification with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, there is some concern out in the Twitter sphere that our chairman, Mr. Hickman, referred to Bill Gates. And that, of course, is Bill Gates' supervisor in the in Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and a fine lawyer in his own right, and an individual who ably served on the Phoenix City Council. It is not billionaire Bill Gates who's trying to buy favor in Maricopa County. That is of great concern over the past couple of hours on Twitter.
Yes, and so I appreciate that clarification. That's for those of us who knew who he is, we just know. But I can see if they don't know that absolutely they would confuse.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's an Arizona thing.
Yes, okay. I don't even related. So I appreciate that. Mr. Liddy, do you have anything else? I think that you've kind of laid out the foundation here for your position in defending the county. I would say that with some success. And I guess my question would be, do you have any sites or any lawsuits that where the plaintiff has prevailed against the county or against the state?
No, Your Honor, we have been busy taking on all comers, and we are 8-0, and the court's still ours. I don't mean the court, I mean the basketball court. You know, winner gets the next game. We are undefeated, and we're it's because our clients are so good. They did a great job trying to follow the rules that you set out. I do have one more slide. I'll flip through the last slide that I do want to share with you, Chairman. Go one more. This slide, and the data supporting it is up above, shows the Maricopa County election reports on the night of election day. That's November 3rd, 2020. The first one starting a little after the polls closed at 7. The first report was shortly after 8 p.m. And then there's another one later in the night, and then a couple more deep into the morning. I think up to one, it says up there in the left, 9:45 p.m. I've got on this chart, 10:53, 11:30, then 1:57 a.m. You'll see there entry number 7. And as you'll see, this graph, which we've made, it tracks the lead that Biden had going into election night. And as ballots came in, Trump's voters vastly outperformed Biden's voters. And so there is a lot of criticism, a lot of complaint, a lot of commentary out throughout the country, if not the world, that there were Biden votes being injected in the middle of the night that allowed Biden to overtake the lead. Well, not here, not in Maricopa County. It was Donald J. Trump that kicked butt on election night, and all those votes started coming in. And you can see how Biden's lead just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. And I wanted to show you that, to show that all the allegations to the contrary are false.
Appreciate that chart and that graph. How many cases do you have outstanding? Did you say 2?
Well, if there are 3, Mr. Chairman, there are 2, which I just mentioned, that are at the United States Supreme Court, and there is one kind of outlier, if you will. What we believe is a resident of Gilbert filed a court in Pinal County. And what that really is a copy and paste job. The federal court that I mentioned earlier, the federal claim that I mentioned earlier was Spider, and that's out there in Pinal County, and we know she's okay, and she has moved from Gilbert to Pinal, so she is a resident of Pinal, and we argued a motion to dismiss today, or is it 3 o'clock yet? No, we'll be arguing that in about an hour and 15 minutes, and we're confident of that as well, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and then at least one of the lawsuits that's being heard at the Supreme Court, the remedy that they're requesting, is that a forensic audit?
Yes. No. Yes, that is correct. It's a bit ironic that one of the reasons why our board cannot go forward with a forensic audit is because the litigation is still ongoing. And one of those pieces of litigation is asking in part for a forensic audit. But we believe that while the conduct of the election is ongoing, and we believe it starts when Maricopa County has to design a ballot style for the election. That would be in late August. And then when the machines are certified, federally certified and state certified, we're hands-on. We can't touch any of that stuff. And then we follow Title 16, the rules for the election given to us by the legislature under that awesome constitutional power, by the book up until the election's over. And the election's over after canvass and certification, and then the exhaustion of the contest period, which for this election, the certification by the state, I believe, was November 30th. And the statute allows for 5 days. So anybody want to file a contest had to do that by the 5th of December. And then any litigation with regard to those, once it is exhausted, our belief is that the election is over, and then the Board of Supervisors will have much more liberty to examine its machines on its own outside the constrictions of Title 16.
But there's still a real possibility that additional litigation could arise. Is that fair?
Well, I think it's a possibility. Somebody can sue anytime, but I think it's unrealistic to think any would be successful because the legislature provided for contests, and contests must be filed between the certification and 5 days. And the 5-day time has elapsed. So we believe we're going to be near the end of this election very soon, depending on, knock on wood, what goes on with the Supreme Court.
But you could have additional federal claims that are made, which then would, in your opinion, I'm just going by what you've talked about, which is you feel like you're frozen in regards to some kind of an audit or a forensic audit because of the ongoing litigation. So if there is new litigation that's filed, then you would be frozen until that was somehow adjudicated. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say this, that it's very difficult for the federal court to get jurisdiction over the election in Arizona and the election in as it was carried out in Maricopa County. The place for that would be state court, and there's ample support for that in the law. And so I think that if there were to be a federal case and someone were charged deprivation of civil rights, it may go forward and we could be frozen. But I think it's most likely that those cases would not be taken by the federal court, as there's ample support that it should be in state court, and the contest period is closed. So although it is possible, I would concede with you, Mr. Chairman, it is possible. I would say it's unlikely.
And I think that's probably fair. So what's the timeline that you anticipate for these that are currently in process, the ongoing litigation?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to jinx anything. So if you can read my mind, but I don't want to say it out loud, but it would not surprise me if by the end of the week,
Amongst friends, Tom.
finished.
Okay.
I would think that the United States Supreme Court would be highly motivated to resolve the two Arizona issues before it rapidly.
Okay. We have two senators would like to ask questions. So Senator Gray, we'll go to you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Liddy, I appreciate your decades of election experience. So I'm going to throw this at you, and it's just out of a curiosity for me. But let's say over the next couple of days, the court cases get cleared off, and then the county does do a forensic audit and finds a malfunction or a compromise in the software. And again, this is just a question. Is there any recourse if it were to be proven that this election had been tampered with? What would be the outcome or consequences of that?
Of course, I can't predict, what might happen in the future, specifically with a hypothetical. But I think, again, what we would do is we would stick to the laws of Arizona if that were found to have happened in Arizona. Obviously, that would be very valuable information if it were to come forward. Valuable for the Board of Supervisors, valuable for the reporter, extremely valuable to the legislature of Arizona. But whether somebody would want to take I think the only evidence I can think of off the top of my head was at the end of the day, as the Electoral College vote, which occurred earlier today, is tabulated and then received by the United States Congress. If one could make a showing for the United States Congress that the tabulation is incorrect and persuade the Congress, the United States Congress may choose to do something about it, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Genti Rita. You're on mute. Can you unmute?
All right. Am I unmuted?
There you go.
Yay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the only thing prohibiting at this point a independent forensic audit is that there's ongoing litigation. Mr. Liddy.
That is the only thing that I think is prohibiting the Board of Supervisors. That yes, because ongoing litigation related to this election that was filed within the contest period means this election's ongoing, and we don't want to be accused of tampering with the evidence. The litigation is about what's in the machines, and if the Supreme Court were to say, okay, we're going to remand this back to the federal court in Arizona, and we want you to order a forensic audit of those machines, I don't want my client to be in a position to say, oh, we already did it, and now we can't do it because he can't go back in time. We can't do that. So we have to wait for this litigation to be over for that. Once it's over and the election in its entirety is over, and then the board has much more freedom to look at its equipment in a manner that would, someone could accuse them of spoiling evidence, the evidence would be gone. But I do want to mention this. The statute does, the state legislature has demanded that every county keep all the ballots for 24 months and keep the cartridges, which have the tallies, for 24 months. Obviously, that 24 months far exceeds the 5-day contest period or any alleged litigation. So I think it's a fair inference that the legislature intended to, at least in some form or another, to have access to that which they demanded be preserved by each county. So that's just another point I wanted to make.
Oh, okay. So it's your legal advice that a forensic audit not take place until the current litigation is somehow resolved. It's not that it says it anywhere. That's just your lawyerly opinion to the Board of Supervisors.
First of all, I want to be clear that, Mr. Chairman and Senator Gentile, that I would never presume to give legal advice to the legislature. You are ably represented by some of the finest attorneys in the state. And if you're asking me what my legal advice would be to my clients, the answer is I will not provide that information to you.
Okay, no, you are. That's okay because you already did. You advised them not to go forward with an independent third-party forensic audit until all of the current lawsuits are either adjudicated or finalized or dropped. So I already got your legal opinion. That's fine. I
I can neither confirm nor deny that was the legal advice that I gave to my client.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, and so, all right, I got that. I do want to just make sure, I just want to comment here because you said a couple of times the Board of Supervisors are just following the law, that they're at the that change or modify law. And of course, that includes not just welcoming the public to participate, but political subdivisions like yourself or the Board of Supervisors. And regularly, they do come down to register for and against bills, many of them election bills that would change Title 16 and thus change their responsibility in the management of our elections. So they're not kind of this party that sits by and then has to respond. They are actively either promoting changes and or stopping changes from happening in the legislative process as it relates to the management of elections. So they're willing participants. And I think that's important because I do think that many of the issues that we have seen in this last election, 2020, and in subsequent elections in 18 and 16 could have been mitigated and reduced if we had, frankly, a county board of supervisors that was more willing to take a proactive approach. We talked about intergovernmental agreements. That was something that I brought to the counties, and most people said it didn't exist until I had to show documentation. And then even then, it wasn't enough to get the counties to kind of be proactive and maybe looking at it and re-voting on whether that relationship was relevant anymore and if it needed modification. So, you know, if we're going to have election integrity and we're going to have voter confidence, we have to make sure we're thinking 2-3 steps ahead, and we're not just constantly responding to the state of current affairs. So in that light, the vast majority of people vote by mail. I don't see a lot of proposals coming from the counties to deal and address voting by mail. In fact, what I see is the counties wanting to push vote by mail, and the bill that they like the most is to allow counties to go to all mail elections. And we've seen that most people have concerns with vote by mail. In fact, most of the problems that we've talked about relate to vote by mail. And I know these aren't specific to the litigation, but they are specific to, again, voter integrity and making sure people have confidence and want to participate. And so I do think that I wanted to be on the record with that, because it's going to take a partnership to fix some of these things. And while I appreciate us reacting to what has transpired, I think we should also, in tandem to that, look at trying to be prophylactic and identify measures that could prevent instances where either there's undue influence, tampering, election fraud, or a lack of confidence. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Senator Gentilita, first of all those bills that you mentioned, Maricopa County has not been up there advocating for them. When you said they, and perhaps you're talking about other counties, but it was not Maricopa County doing that. And I want to make absolutely clear that I have been through Title 16 and there are no whims. Maricopa County doesn't do anything following the whims of Title 16. There's a lot of shalls. There's a lot of musts. The legislature writes the law, we follow the law. We're not just doing it on a whim. We are deliberately, with great deliberation, following the law as provided to us by the legislature. Nothing on a whim, not just following. It is our legal obligation to follow the law, and that's what we're doing. And the mere presence of the chairman of the Board of Supervisors in this hearing today, as is the availability of our elections director, and my somewhat unusual presentation, as I'm not a fact witness, I'm an attorney for the county. I'm here because my client, the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, has asked me throughout the week and now and in the future to work with your future committee and with this committee to do whatever we can to help facilitate the gathering of all the information you need in order to make the choices of whether you want to make changes to Title 16. But certainly we don't do anything on a whim.
Mr. Liddy, I didn't say that. I said you kind of presented it like you were at the whim of our statutory construction. In other words, that
I did not.
Participant in the making of that. And I think it's important for the public to realize you are. You have contract lobbyists at the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars that you pay for to come in and advocate against proposals and for proposals, but primarily as it relates to election law, against them. And you have in-house lobbyists, and you have, of course, attorneys. So you are a part of the construction of Title 16, and that's what my comment was referencing. And I do believe when it did come to updating our permanent early voting list, that the Arizona Association of Counties was opposed, along with the Secretary of State's office and the Maricopa County Recorder's.
I don't represent that. I don't know anything about that.
You represent the county.
I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, Senator, if I said anything with my vocabulary, my diction, my body language that led you to believe that my client follows Title 16 on some whim, I humbly apologize. I want to declare for all the world to hear, no, we don't. We deliberately follow the law of Title 16. That's what we do. The power is with the legislature, according to the United States Constitution. And to the extent that the 4.7 million people that reside in Maricopa County and are represented in part by the members of the Board of Supervisors should not have their voice heard at the legislature, I'm not sure where that's coming from. But obviously every citizen has a right to have his or her voice be heard in the legislature. But at the end of the day, it's the Arizona legislature that writes the law, Maricopa County, we follow it, but not on a whim.
Excellent. I'm glad you said that because I'll certainly be quoting that in committee.
Yeah,
We write the law.
Mr. Liddy, I think Maricopa County has a greater presence before the legislature than you can imagine through various avenues, including the Association of Counties, which regularly stands before my committee and testifies that they represent all 15 counties, which would include Maricopa. So if they're doing things that you're not aware of, Mr. Chairman, I suggest that maybe you need to look a little closer into what is being said on your behalf. So, Chairman Hickman.
Yes, there are associations that some of us belong to. ACO is an association that works with all the other electeds. County Supervisors Association is the association that my board members are involved with. And quite often, we try to work with their association, but there's also times when the County Supervisors Association takes a different approach or a different tack to pending litigation, especially when it comes to budgetary authority issues and the things that we are involved in. So I understand that ACO sees you a lot, and Senator Jenny Rita, I understand that. But please know that when there is something important to the county supervisors, you'll probably get a visit from the County Supervisors Association of all 15 counties. But when there's also something very important to Maricopa County, being the largest county, that's why you get to see Supervisor Gates, Supervisor Bill Gates, Supervisor Sellers, Supervisor Hickman, Supervisor Gallardo, and Supervisor Chukri. All of us represent individual districts of this beautiful county. And one other key approach, a key thing for your legislature and your body to remember, when it comes to public statements, when it comes to strategies out there, when it comes to county supervisors that want to do something, understand that we do not have the ability to caucus. We have open meeting law. We do not caucus. So that's why it's upsetting at times for all 5 of us to stand by and be mute, it seems, when something of such import that we're discussing right now, the confidence and integrity of the election, we have to get through litigation to see what the court proves as being innocent or guilty, and we have to go from there. So I just thought I'd make that statement for all 5 of us, because it's very hard right now to watch Twitter, to try our best to talk to our legislators in our districts, to tell how important this is without it making it look like we're building some sort of vote.
Yeah, we understand and we appreciate the time, but again, we understand the constraints that exist with open meeting laws. We understand the constraints that exist with the board. But again, I will reiterate that Maricopa County, as a member of the broader coalition of counties in Arizona, has a fairly robust voice, or at least is represented as having a fairly robust voice at the legislature on a very regular basis. So if they're not representing Maricopa County, then I recommend that you rethink your association with them and come down and visit us, and we're happy to see you.
Chairman Farnsworth, I think that you understand that it's important to me because Senator Rick Ray talked about one phone call at 5:30 in the morning. He's not talking about all of the phone calls and neither is Ben Toma. Neither is Joanne Osborne. So neither is Sina Kerr. They've been in direct contact with me. They've been involved in meetings that I've talked with constituents that have real concerns. Voters have extreme concerns. I just want to let you know, and your august body, as what our legal counsel calls you, because you are, that we want to work together when it comes to transparency, and confidence in this election. And we want to work together. And I'm in front of you, and I brought my experts to the best ability that I could to be able to talk to you and your committee and to the upcoming chairman, Senator Eugenia Rita. And I just want to let everyone know we are going to work together in the space provided by you, the legislators of the state of Arizona.
And we appreciate your willingness to do so. Okay, Mr. Leach, do you have questions?
I have a comment. This will come up next session, but I want to say it because I don't want it lost in them. And when we hear from Josh Credit, I will remind everybody of the move that Mr. Fontes of Maricopa County was going to do in sending out ballots to everybody. And so that doesn't need to be discussed here. We can discuss it with Mr. Credit and the actions that were taken thereof.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Liddy, do you have anything else? We do have some other witnesses we need to hear from, so.
Mr. Chairman, only to thank you and your committee for allowing me to present your committee and my obligation to assist you in any way that I can in the future.
We appreciate your time and your presentation, so thank you. Members, any final questions for Mr. Liddy? Hearing none? Okay, thank you very much. I don't think we have anything else for the county. If you can stick around, that's great. We may have some questions. If not, we understand. It's already been a fairly long day. So I think we're going to move on, and we have a couple of people here from the Attorney General's office. Josh Credit is here. Josh, there you are. So Josh, we appreciate you being here, and we'd like to hear from you kind of in the same vein that we did the Maricopa County people. Tell us, if you will, and I know you have somebody else here that is affiliated with the fraud task force, but I don't know if you have an opening statement. I don't know if you want to kind of fill us in on what you're doing. I don't really know what you're doing versus statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I thought that I could maybe give a general overview of what the unit has been doing since it was created about a year and a half ago. And then I have Jennifer Wright, who's an assistant attorney general in our unit. I think she's available virtually. I don't know if I see her yet. But she'll be able to go into more in depth as to what the complaints we've seen recently in the last couple months and weeks and what our office has found.
Okay, and that sounds great. This is, for those who don't know, this is the election integrity unit that was formed within the office of the Attorney General. So if you would proceed and just kind of give us an overview.
Thank you, sir. For the record, my name is Josh Credit, Deputy Attorney General for Law and Policy with Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich. And with me is Assistant Attorney General Jennifer Wright. She's one of the key members of the Election Integrity Unit. We appreciate the opportunity to present for you today about the work of the unit. And as I said earlier, I'm going to talk generally more broad strokes about what we've been doing since it started. And then Jennifer, I think I'll kick it to her for what has been going on recently since the primary in general and post-election day. So the unit just generally investigates complaints of civil and criminal violations of election law and voter fraud. And we have a public complaint process for members of the public to provide us allegations of fraud. The unit also works in concert with our Solicitor General's office and also our government accountability unit to address kind of all things election integrity, but I'll just rattle off a few things they do. I mean, it's not limited to this, but it's, litigation, opinion requests, campaign finance, misuse of public monies related to elections, obviously investigating allegations of voter fraud, whether in the civil or criminal context. The unit is made up of 4 full-time employees. That's 1 civil attorney, 1 criminal attorney, 1 special agent, and 1 administrative staffer. Although they do currently also utilize 6 additional agents from our criminal division's special investigations section to assist with open investigations as needed. The unit was created during the 19 legislative session in the fiscal year 2020 budget and has an annual appropriation of $530,000. Shortly after the unit was created, Jen Wright was hired on. I think it was around late July, maybe August of 2019. And the first thing she started doing, I think it may have been even on day one, was reviewing the election procedures manual draft that Secretary of State Katie Hobbs had provided. Now, over the course of approximately 4 months, she and our office suggested about 115 suggested edits. And over the course of that time, about 100 of those were eventually incorporated and made the cut into the final manual. And I'll just run through some of the items that we suggested that did make it into that final manual or were removed or prevented from being in that final manual. The first thing is preventing the authorization of all mail ballots for elections that included statewide races. Eliminating the non-statutory cure period for unsigned ballots that extended 5 days past the election. Now, many of you probably know this. This ultimately became the subject of litigation, which I can get to in just a minute. Preventing the implementation of electronic adjudication through the manual because it directly contravenes state law. And then obviously this was followed by the legislature passing an emergency statute to implement electronic adjudication. Preventing the manual from allowing county recorders to establish pop-up precincts without obtaining prior Board of Supervisors approval. And another example is ensuring there was uniform security measures for drop boxes, which were something that was just introduced in the 2019 manual. Now, and Mr. Chairman, if anyone has questions during this, I'm happy to answer or answer at the end. Just cut me off.
Okay, we'll do that.
During the fall 2019 election, several election-related complaints came in, and I'll touch on one notable one. It was a complaint filed regarding illegal electioneering by the Bullhead City Manager related to Proposition 415. An investigation was done, and a violation was determined to have occurred. And I believe that is currently wrapping up in settlement negotiations right now. If you fast forward to the first part of the year, some of the examples of the unit's work in early 2020 included the following. And this is the item that Mr. Leach just touched on. So right before the presidential preference election, Maricopa County Recorder Fontes attempted to illegally mail out 200,000 ballots to registered voters who had not yet cast ballots and who had not requested an early ballot. Our unit was successfully able to run to court, file a motion, and obtain a temporary restraining order, which prevented Mr. Fontes from legally mailing those ballots. Also in March, Senate President Karen Fann submitted to our office an opinion request. She asked us whether the Secretary of State could lawfully require all candidate petitions to be filed only by mail, or if the Secretary had to allow, per the statute, for those to be dropped off in person. Our attorneys and our unit assisted with the research and drafting of that opinion and provided it promptly back to the President, which did affirm that in-person signatures had to be allowed per the law. We've also issued multiple indictments related to signature fraud with candidates running for various levels of government. There was a candidate for Flagstaff mayor, a former congressional candidate, a former legislative candidate who is alleged to have defrauded the Clean Elections Commission, and most recently an initiative petition circulating firm, which was alleged to have violated laws prohibiting compensation based upon the number of signatures collected. And we also recently have obtained 2 successful convictions, one related to double voting from the 2016 election. I believe it was an individual who voted in the Arizona and Nevada election. And then also a successful conviction of an individual who violated the 75-foot limit during the 2018 election by having a camera filming people. Now, before I move on to complaints, about the primary in general, I think I'll touch briefly on the election-related cases. Arizona saw its host of cases. These are happening all around the country. But on at least 8 different occasions during this year, our office had to intervene or move to defend Arizona election law because election officials would not defend state law or because they were acting contrary to the law. This was touched on a little bit earlier with Senator Judiciary, but the Brnovich v. DMC, Democrat National Committee case, is currently pending before the U.S. Supreme Court and involves a challenge to Arizona's restrictions on ballot harvesting and also, as was touched on earlier, deals with precinct voting and whether to count those votes. Our office earlier this year had to intervene to defend the law after the Secretary of State declined to do so. and we were able to successfully obtain a stay of the Ninth Circuit's en banc opinion, which basically, in other words, means that for the whole 2020 election, the prohibition or the restriction on ballot harvesting was in place, the rules on out-of-precinct voting were in place, and that stay will remain in place pending the appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I believe oral argument is expected in early 2021 with a decision by June. And you may recall there were two different cases filed earlier this year to force Arizona to allow initiative signatures to be collected on the e-qual system, which is in direct conflict with the Arizona Constitution. Our office intervened to defend in both cases after the secretary declined to defend the law, and our office was successful in the defense of both cases, prohibiting the illegal access to the online signature system. The next case I'll mention is the Arizona Democratic Party versus Hobbs case. And we similarly were able to defend the law, which, and this deals with the issue I mentioned earlier, whether or not you can allow for the curing up to 5 days post-election day if a ballot was missing a signature. This is the issue that we prevented from being in the manual authorizing it. After our office intervened to defend the law, and after a lower court actually ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, we were able to successfully prevail with a 3-judge panel at the Ninth Circuit, which ultimately ruled in our favor. So again, this was a extremely last-minute change that could have been done to the law. And many of you probably know, the Purcell principle. The courts do not like these last-minute changes to the law. It does nothing but cause confusion for voters. They don't know if they can cure, if they cannot cure. So this is one where we were able to stop that from happening. And frankly, it's something that has happened in other states, which we've seen in post-election litigation. Now, I'll briefly mention 2 more cases. I know it's been a long day. During the August primary, our office received several complaints from voters that Mr. Fontes had mailed early ballots during the primary with illegal instructions related to, crossing out a mistaken vote and then filling in a different circle. Our office sent Mr. Fontes a letter on August 11th stating that this direction was deficient and directing him to ensure that future ballots being sent out specifically for the November election contained corrected instructions. After he declined to do that, a lawsuit was almost immediately filed by the Arizona Public Integrity Alliance against Mr. Fontes and the board. And our office filed an amicus brief in that case at the lower level and then on appeal at the Arizona Supreme Court. And this was followed by the Arizona Supreme Court, I believe in early September, ruling that Mr. Fontes had exceeded his authority and prohibiting him from sending the illegal instructions with ballots for the November election. Now, the last lawsuit I'll mention, and I'm happy to talk more about these, or Jennifer is as well, she's more the subject matter expert, but this was a lawsuit dealing with our voter registration deadline. This was filed very last minute in federal court, and a federal district court judge, surprisingly, ordered the deadline. I believe it was almost, close of business the day it was supposed to be done. He ordered the deadline extended by 18 days. And then the Secretary of State announced her intent to not appeal that decision. So our office had to move very quickly to intervene to defend the law and appeal the case. It was then that the Secretary reversed course, opposed our motion to intervene, and settled the case. And the end result of all of this back and forth was the voter registration deadline being extended 10 days. And as I'll point out, as we saw during this time and even after the election, I had friends ask me, what is the deadline? If I registered after, does my vote count, does it not count? And this is just cuts to the heart of why you should not allow these last minute election law changes, because all it does is sow voter confusion. Now, beyond litigation, the Election Integrity Unit has sent several cease and desist letters and called for internal investigations of official actions. We can provide copies of those to you if you'd like. And now, before I kick it to Jennifer with the chairman's permission, again, I think it's worth noting that thanks to the legislature thinking ahead and creating the Election Integrity Unit, and thanks to the work that it has been able to do, it's not just about what happened during the primary in general. Everything related to this election has been going on for 2 years now. Thanks to the work they've been able to do, I think we were able to prevent much of the post-election litigation, even though Mr. Liddy said there has been quite a bit. We've been able to prevent most of the, or a lot of the post-election litigation, such as what we saw in the Texas versus Pennsylvania case at the U.S. Supreme Court just as recently as a few days ago. So unless there are questions related to what I just ran through, I'm happy to answer any, but with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll kick it to Jennifer and she can touch on all of the various complaints, the volume and whatnot we've received recently.
Any questions for Mr. Credit? All right, sir. Mr. Leach, is that?
Yeah, that I couldn't get to my raised hand quick enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Josh, thanks for being here. Would you want to go in? Could you go into the details of the Sharpie Gate, or is that going to be left for Jen?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Leach, I think Jen has quite a bit of info on Sharpie Gate.
The Assistant Attorney General, Jennifer Wright, if you would go ahead and just give us an opening statement. Tell us what you're seeing in this during the election, post-election. What have been the biggest complaints? And then I'd like to know what your major concerns are, not only in this election, but moving forward. There are a couple of things I want to ask you about, but give us your opinion, if you would, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As Josh mentioned, my name is Jennifer Wright. I'm the civil attorney assigned to the Elections Integrity Unit. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you the work that we've been engaged in. As Josh mentioned, I'm going to discuss in particular the election complaint form that our office initiated and some related investigations. In July of 2020, the unit launched a public portal to submit election-related complaints directly to the unit. Notably, Arizona is only one of 5 states that have an online election complaint form. Since its launch, the unit has received over 2,500 electronically submitted complaints and emails. Of those, over 2,000 were submitted after the close of election. The complaints received on and before Election Day primarily alleged particularized concerns, including concerns over unsolicited election-related text messages, unsolicited voter registration and PEBBLE applications, allegations of violations of electioneering laws, among other things. After Election Day, the unit was flooded with more generalized concerns, as well as concerns stemming from voters unable to understand confusing, incomplete, and misleading information displayed on official election websites that reported early ballot status. Regarding Sharpies, the unit started receiving complaints during early voting. At that time, the unit began investigating the issue, but within days of the first complaint, Maricopa County released a video explaining that the new tabulators can read ballots even with bleed-through, and that Sharpies were now recommended by the equipment manufacturer. Based on the official response, we forwarded the complaints received to Maricopa for their records and closed those pre-election complaints with the complainants. On Election Day, the unit received more Sharpie-related complaints. According to interviews that I personally conducted with Election Day witnesses, the ballot tabulation machines were not alleged to be rejecting the ballots based on those Election Day reports. In the days following the election, we received over 1,200 Sharpie-related complaints. More than 1,000 of those were generalized concerns about having to use a Sharpie, but failed to allege specific problems related to their use. However, about 60 of the complaints alleged their ballot was rejected and either placed in that slot 3 or for later tabulation, or that they or the poll worker pressed the green button to force the defective ballot to be cast. Accordingly, on November 4th, we requested a formal explanation from the Maricopa County Elections Department regarding the use of Sharpies. Based on the county's response and subsequent court testimony, the unit is satisfied the Sharpies did not cause widespread disenfranchisement. Regardless, Arizona law is silent as to writing instruments, the use of double-sided ballots, and bleed-through. As just kind of an aside, while Title 16 provides civil enforcement tools for campaign finance issues, including civil subpoenas, the legislature has not provided specific civil remedies or tools elsewhere in Title 16, leaving our office primarily with criminal remedies. This is especially true for post-election issues that require us to react to what has already happened. Unlike pre-election issues, post-election we cannot obtain an injunction. Regardless, on November 5th, we sent a letter to the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors encouraging them to increase the hand audit count from 2% to 5% to help alleviate concerns and instill public confidence in the integrity of the vote tabulation equipment. That suggestion was not heeded. Regarding other complaints lodged, the unit is still reviewing hundreds of complaints and has dozens of open criminal investigations. Due to the ethical rules for prosecutors, our office neither confirms nor denies in criminal investigations. I'll generally note that the unit is investigating complaints stemming from allegations of illegal voting. A list was submitted to the unit just last week on December 8th, alleging specific instances of potentially illegally cast votes. Notably, even if the unit is able to substantiate every one of the alleged deletions, the unit has to prove who illegally cast the ballot to secure a criminal conviction. Further, the number of illegal votes we are investigating based on referrals would not alter the outcome of the election. The unit is fully investigating these allegations and intends to prosecute every substantiated violation, but criminal investigations take time. Finally, in addition to the hundreds of complaints requesting a forensic audit, the unit has received generalized allegations pertaining to certain equipment vendors. The unit has already communicated that it is our opinion that county officials may ensure the accuracy of their equipment by auditing their equipment. Lastly, I want to point out that the unit not only engages in election integrity work, we also assist voters with enfranchisement as well. Personally, I've helped renew registrations of individuals who are removed from the county voter registration files due to changes in Service Arizona. I've helped another individual who's removed from the voter registration files based on a misunderstanding of law by the county workers. And I took steps against a nursing home that was preventing residents from exercising the right to vote. The unit also personally delivered over a dozen ballots that were dumped in the desert to make certain those voters had their voice heard in this election. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Do note that due to the sensitive nature of criminal investigations, I'm unable to confirm, deny, or discuss ongoing investigations.
I appreciate that. We understand that, but it also limits our ability to kind of get some information. Do we have any questions from the committee? Mr. Leach?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jed, for the update. Josh, and I think that the chairman introduced you from the civil division, which begs the question, I think you have a criminal partner in the elections integrity. Is there any report on the criminal side? That's either Josh or Jen. Or are you reporting for both sides?
I'm reporting for the unit as a whole.
Unit as a whole. So everything, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? I have a couple. I want to get your opinion on 3 areas of concern. I think there are plenty of other concerns. The issues of dumping ballots, the issues of getting somebody who's not capable of voting, filling out their ballot and bringing it in. There are a lot of areas where I think fraud could occur. But there are 3 that I'm concerned about particularly that I think are significant. And one's not fraud, one we've already talked about it, but for example, we had a bill, I don't remember exactly how long ago, Senator Ugenti-Rita may remember, but it had to do with cleaning up the Pebble. And I think it was your bill, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, the issue is we don't have, when we say permanent early voting list, we actually are permanent early voting list, and there's no automatic way to get somebody off of that list. And so if someone dies, if we have people that have moved, I can tell you that's one of the concerns of complaints is that if people move or if kids move out of state and then the parents continue to get those ballots, those are easily voted. I know there was at least one case where there was an allegation of that. But we had a bill, Senator Ugenti-Rita had a bill that came before my committee, and it simply would have said something to the effect that if you don't vote in 2 consecutive elections, that you would then be removed from the Pebble. And for those who don't know, that's the permanent early voting list in Arizona. You wouldn't be prohibited from signing up again. So if for some reason you didn't vote and you didn't want to be removed, all you have to do is to sign back up, put your name back on the Pebble, and you'll receive those ballots like you did before. There was tremendous opposition in committee. allegations of voter suppression. But in my mind, that seems like a rational direction to take, where we're going to keep and we heard from Maricopa County that keeping those voter rolls as pristine as possible in real time is integral to having an election system that we can count on. So I throw that out to you. I don't believe that has passed. I don't believe that we have that in place. And so we still have truly a permanent early voting list, even if you die. From a fraud perspective, what is your opinion on that legislation and how it would affect the ability to clean up those rolls?
Well, I do want to correct one thing, is that the Arizona Department of Health Services is required to send a list on a monthly basis to the Secretary of State. And so anybody who's been reported to DHS as having passed away is supposed to be removed through the roll on the rolls. So while there are allegations that dead voters or people who are alleged to be deceased may have voted and may still be on the rolls, there is a process in the statute that's supposed to remove people who at least were reported to Arizona Department of Health Services as being deceased. This may or may not include people that died in another state. So that maybe needs to see some improvements in the statutes and legislation. Regarding the removing people from the voter registration files, on a regular basis, I think that it's imperative that we have clean rolls. A lot of the allegations that we have related to illegal voting are for people that, maybe moved out of state or, again, like you had mentioned, and I just mentioned, deceased voters. So we want clean rolls, but I really leave that up to the legislature to decide the best mechanism for that. I think that I believe it's the Carter-Baker Commission has some recommendations back from 2005 that discusses ways to maintain voter rolls, and I would encourage you to look at best practices in other states and do that report.
And I appreciate that. And I wasn't asking for you to do anything about it. I was asking your professional opinion on how maintaining that clean roll is going to help us to prevent fraud. That's really, I'm looking at you through the lens that you're on the fraud task force, and would that be good policy? Sounds to me like you said yes, kind of in a roundabout way, but we'll take that as a yes, unless you want to dispute that. The other one that I want to talk about just briefly, and there's nothing we can do about it at the state level, but I want to point out that and ask about from your perspective, again, through the lens as a fraud investigator or a prosecutor, is the limitation that we have dealing with people giving sufficient and adequate ID to prove that they are citizens. And if they don't, we went through that before, I assume you heard, that if they don't, they get to vote in the federal ballots and they become a federal ballot voter. From your perspective, does that enhance the opportunity for fraud in this state?
Well, based off of the federal only, the ability to register to vote as a federal only voter in Arizona, pursuant to the requirements under the Intertribal Council decision back in, well, now I'm going to forget the year, but some years back, and our creation of federal only, the attestation that somebody is a citizen and without requiring any other proof of citizenship, and to some degree, the only identification that's required would be maybe 2 utility bills provided, when they go vote in person. That's not the same level of protection as requiring someone to show their driver's license. And in Arizona, driver's licenses are required to show documented proof of citizenship unless they're registered as a foreign national, as a foreign, they're called an F-type voter, or I'm sorry, not voter, driver's license. So when somebody is registered to vote, and if they're listed as an F-type license and found to be, then they'd be notified as being a non-citizen and wouldn't be allowed to register to vote. But the federal only with the attestation creates an opportunity for people who may not be citizens to register to vote. We are bound by that because of the Intertribal Council decision at this point, unless we were to go back to the Election Assistance Commission and again renew our request for documentary proofs of citizenship to be used on the federal form. So that would have to go back to the Election Assistance Commission to try to again request for documented proof of citizenship.
And I understand that. That's why I said our hands are tied. We're kind of in a box, and I call upon the Fed to make a change there. The final piece that I want to talk about, you kind of referenced, and that is in Title 16, 579, 1A and B, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And these are alternative forms of identification. So if you don't have a driver's license, if you don't have a state issued identification, you simply have to show two forms of ID where your name and address are the same as the when you registered to vote. So those could be utility bills, they could be other bills. I don't have a lot of confidence in that. Certainly, and again, looking through the lens of potential fraud, I don't know what stops someone who wants to commit fraud and wants to vote in an election that they have no right to vote in. What stops them from setting up a bogus account with one of the utilities, setting up a bank account, and then using those to register, get on the Pebble, and then they're not taken off ever? That's concerning to me. Do you have a concern about that standard?
I definitely think that photo identification is preferred avenue for confirming identity of an individual.
Okay. And your very cautious responses are duly noted. Senator Ugenti-Rita.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, to that point, in the statute that the chairman referenced, was that born out of a ballot initiative, or is that statutory language?
It's statutory, but I don't know if the genesis is. It might be.
I mean, it is statutory language, yeah, but I wonder if that was that ballot initiative, Prop 200.
I'm not sure. It's possible that it is.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Ugenti, I believe it is Prop 105 protected. I think it was passed, and I think it may have been amended with a supermajority later.
Okay. And I do want to bring that up because I think, Mr. Chairman, you're talking about a very important topic area, but it's important to note that if it is 105 and it looks like it is protected, that if we wanted to change it, we have some additional.
Correct. And I understand that, and I'm verifying it looks like it is Prop 105. Okay. So it'd have to go back to the ballot, but I would suggest to the people of Arizona that would be a very good move. So that we actually require some kind of valid ID rather than just a couple of utility bills. That makes absolutely no sense to me, but okay, we'll move on from there. We have Senator Quesada.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to everyone who's been here for this whole committee. It's been long but interesting discussions. I want to ask Mrs. Wright some follow-up questions specifically about the three concerns that our chairman raised. But first, one of the things that you talked about in your presentation was that one of the actions that your unit has taken in the past has been to help voters who were mistakenly removed from the voter rolls by county workers. Can you tell me a little bit more about that service that you provided to those voters? How they were removed accidentally, and how these voters discovered that, and really how they how you help them resolve that issue.
Certainly. So one of the first issues is regarding the recent changes to Service Arizona. There was it was reported in the news, but it definitely occurred where there was a change in Service Arizona, and the link between the voter registration system and Service Arizona had some sort of deficiency where people were thinking that they were registering to vote online, but it was actually the system on the other side was not accepting it. There's also based off of the new changes that Service Arizona made regarding automatically updating somebody's address on their voter registration file. We had one individual in particular who was registered to vote, lives in Scottsdale, but also has a property in northern Arizona. And so when he went to go pay his bills, his annual tag fees for his car, his address is listed as for his vehicle on his property in northern Arizona, although he ordinarily lives in Phoenix. when he went to go pay this bill, it automatically changed his voter registration from Maricopa to Yavapai County. So that was not his intent at all. So he was removed and was unable to vote during the primary because his voter registration was automatically changed. And this was based off of an agreement based off of a lawsuit that was filed by an outside group wanting to change the PAVA rules or related to voter registration, so that when people make changes to their address, it automatically updates their voter registration. Unfortunately, it now requires people to uncheck and to say that they don't want that to happen, that the address to be changed. So some people are finding their voter registration file is being unintentionally changed to an address that they no longer live at. Similarly, we had an individual who owns a property here and has a car here in Arizona, but lives in Texas, who went to go pay their annual registration fee for their vehicle, and it automatically registered him to vote and sent him an early ballot that he never requested or asked for because he didn't realize he had to uncheck the systems based off of the new changes that were made with Service Arizona. So that's both, enfranchising people that shouldn't be in regards to the person in Texas who never intended to vote in Arizona and was concerned when he received that ballot, as well as disenfranchising people who did not intend to have their voter registration file moved from their primary address to their secondary address. In addition, we had one county that had, based off of a change of address, their address was not listed on the county register as being a postal address. And so the individual, while they had been living there for a decade, for some reason there was an update, and this was one of the smaller counties to the system. They identically lived on a residential property, but in fact he did. So we had to just correct that to make sure that the county knew that they could register someone to vote the place of where they live. It was not a commercial address. It just hadn't gone. They wanted him to get his lot permitted for residential and cost him $10,000. So, yeah, but that's kind of an aside.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Wright, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that. I'm wondering if the legislature did move forward with a PEVL purge, which is the process that was described earlier to remove people from the permanent early voter list, would that not kind of cause that same type of confusion for a greater number of voters who would then reach out to your office for help when they try to vote or expected to receive an early ballot, they don't, and then it causes them to lose that opportunity to vote early. Would that not increase your involvement with those voters having to fix that situation for them as well?
Well, I'm not sure I know the full details of the bill that was being discussed. It sounded like if they hadn't voted in multiple election cycles on the PEVL, so there may be people who would have intended to vote by PEVL that would need to then re-register for PEVL. My understanding is it's not removing them from registering to vote. It just stops automatically mailing them a ballot, in which case they could go online and request a ballot prior to that. But again, it may not. It's hard to say as to how many people who haven't voted in several election cycles would notice that they stopped receiving the ballot. I can say we received dozens of family members who received ballots for people who either no longer live at their address or the previous residents at their address. So in addition to the complaints of people who were somehow their voter registration was changed, we also received dozens of complaints of ballots mailed to people who no longer live at the address that was listed. So, it kind of cuts both ways. That also increases my workload to make sure to find out and investigate why ballots were being sent to those addresses.
And that is, to that point, that is correct, that they would have to have not voted in multiple cycles. Also, if I recall correctly, it required that some notification be given to those before they were removed. So it wasn't just simply removal, it was notification. If they wanted to stay on, they could contact the electors or the election department, and they would be left on. So, okay, Mr. Quesada, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Wright, I kind of want to move on to a second concern that was raised earlier regarding the federal-only ballots that certain voters would receive. And I'm wondering, you talked a lot about the the criminal activity that you have investigated, or potential instances of fraud that your office has investigated, how many investigations have you conducted regarding a person who should not have been able to vote because they weren't a citizen, yet still voted using only a federal form? How many of those investigations have you conducted and found to have been legit investigations?
Well, we don't review voter registration files or records on our own accord. So the only information we have regarding investigating people who may be non-citizens is based off of either what we did have one complaint that's currently, I believe except for the fact to say that we have one instance of for national voting in an Arizona election. It's under seal still at this point because we haven't been able to serve the indictment, but we do have a case that we currently have. We also have allegations based off of the list that I said was provided just last week on December 8th, that there are 38 individuals in which they were unable to, this complainant alleges there's no record of these people existing. So we've got 38 people we're going to start looking at, and we may or may not find that these people are, the individual may have been mistaken as to whether or not that they existed or didn't exist. So I'd say that at this point, we're limited by somebody notifying us of a potential concern before we pick up an investigation.
And I guess just to clarify, Mr. Chairman is right. So am I understanding correctly that so far there's one instance of a potential non-citizen who has voted using a federal form?
I'm not sure that they use the federal form. What I'm saying is that we don't go through and audit the federal forms, so we're limited to investigating what's brought to our attention. So at this point, I would say that we have not had anybody bring to our allege is a non-citizen. We've conducted zero, except for the one that I indicated before. We've conducted zero investigations regarding the citizenship status of anybody on our voter registration files.
Okay, and so Mr. Chairman is right. Thank you for that clarification. So zero, potentially one so far. Because that limits you, or I'm assuming that other members may say, well, that's only because you haven't been notified of those situations. Nationwide, how many complaints have you heard about from other states where a non-citizen form? And would you expect that rate would also be the same in Arizona?
I investigated that issue. Not all states require documented proof of citizenship. I know a case that Kansas just had cert denied on a case regarding documented proof of citizenship, and they had some number in that case, and I can't remember how many that they had found. But again, there's only a handful of states that have the documented proof of citizenship requirement. So other states, I know that Texas has investigated hundreds of thousands of cases of potentially non-registered citizens or non-U.S. citizens. So that's about all I know about.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is for either Jennifer or Josh. It was something that you brought up, Josh, about late changes in voting procedure. Is there anything that we can do? I mean, we can make statutes, but is there anything that we can do that would actually inhibit the actions of a federal judge like Logan that basically went in and just arbitrarily made a change? It doesn't seem like statutorily we could restrict a federal judge, but if you've got any ideas, I'm sure Senator Ugenti-Rita would be willing to run a bill.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Senator Gray, I'd love to brainstorm that with you because, basically by the very nature of when they brought it and, mechanically how much time it takes to, do a motion to intervene and then have that opposed. And and then have an oral argument. It kind of invites these last minute changes because they got 10 days. They changed the statute. They extended 10 days even though ultimately I think we would have won. And if it had gone to the Supreme Court, I'm confident we would have won, but that would have added another few days, which then would have almost made the whole thing moot because they would have gotten what they were trying to get. But I'm happy to work with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Oh, Senator Ugenti Rita, looks like your hand is up.
Yes, I'm lowering it now. It's
There you go.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I did have a question for the AG's office. Either one of you can take it. And it's about the federal only ballots. So from the testimony today, I just want to make sure I understand this. Legally, because of federal law, we, Arizona, the state of Arizona, cannot require, per our statute, that a voter prove they are a citizen. They sign a form attesting to the fact that they have met the citizen requirement, and that's sufficient. And then they can move on, and then they vote that federal only ballot, because we do have additional requirements if they wanted to vote our, I don't know what you would call it, our larger state ballot or something.
The full ballot.
The full ballot. Thank you so much. Is that right so far?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti, that is correct. I mean, it is a felony if you avow you say you're a citizen on the federal.
Okay.
You're really not, and I think it's a state violation too to be voting when you're not really a citizen. But beyond, we are preempted on the federal form.
Okay, to require that they prove as a stipulation before they get a ballot. Just attesting to it suffices. So let me just ask, is there anything we could do? Could we segregate those ballots and then investigate if they indeed are citizens by cross-checking them with other databases, and therefore then proving that they are indeed a citizen or not? So we didn't require them to do it at the front end, but are we able to do something about it and figure out whether they're a citizen or not?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, I know that Representative Townsend, for example, worked with you all, and a bill was passed and signed that I think put a little more transparency on those numbers. I think the recorders have to now report how many they have. I don't know if they report how many actually vote. But I think to do that, I think that way should with the secretary or the recorders who have those roles, because we don't possess the voter registration rolls, for example, and I mean I know you all don't. So I think there would have to be maybe some legislation to encourage cooperation.
So, Mr. Chairman, so we could require the political subdivision or, I don't know, entity or governmental entity that's in charge of the voter rolls to cross-reference those federal-only applications to make sure that those individuals are citizens or not. I mean, that's legislation we could work on, and that wouldn't violate the federal law.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, I'm not aware of that being part of what the reason we're preempted, I think, is different from what you're talking about. So that would have to, maybe there's a different legal theory of why it would violate it, but I think you could do that, yes.
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Senator D'Alessandro, there you go. Your hand is up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Wright, I swore I wasn't going to say anything else today, but your comments about 38, 37 people, someone's asserting that these people don't exist. Can you just share what kind of documentation is the intake for cases like that? It really perplexes me. So I'd be grateful for any guidance. You could tell me what the process is.
Sure. So we have the elections complaint form that's available on our website. And last week, an individual submitted to us a list of names of individuals that herself and I think a group of people had investigated that they believe maybe have unlawfully or illegally voted in this last election. So we have just received that, and we are just now beginning the intake. So based off of the allegations, there was significant amount of information that suggested that our criminal division should review that. So those are now being sent over to criminal for review, and we will be obtaining copies of the information that she supports her claims, because the election complaint form doesn't have the ability to, I think, submit everything, probably to the extent that the research that her team of people had done. But we've received it, and it will now go to the next step. But criminal investigations take time, and there were, lots of names on this list, and so some of them are alleged to have specifically voted in this election. Some were just alleged to have received ballots, even though they were just allegedly deceased. We have had some claims that have been sent into our office by Maricopa County Board of Supervisors in particular that allege that maybe some people deceased voted in the election. The ones that have been referred by the Board of Supervisors, we have cleared as the individuals were not, one, there was a misunderstanding in the way the computer program worked, and the other one was in fact not deceased, so that was good news. So at this point we have allegations, and again, they just came in on December 8th, and so the process is now just beginning. And I know it for some people the criminal process takes a lot more time than they would like, but we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed before we can take any further steps on these. So we are working through those, and it will investigate them on a case-by-case basis based on the allegations that we received.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a little follow-up, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you so much. Since I'm the exiting member on the committee, would you please keep me apprised at the House of how these cases turn out, even though I'm not going to be serving on a Judiciary or Election committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none. We appreciate your time, appreciate your testimony and the work that you're doing. So, members, we don't have anybody else that we put on the agenda to speak or to testify. So I'm going to open it up to the committee members for any discussion, any comments before I close and we adjourn. Chairman Hickman, it looks like he wants to say something.
No,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the invitation. If you're going to have a committee meeting now, I appreciate the invitation. I'm glad we all got to talk and ask questions of each other, and I look forward to seeing what the committee comes through with.
Great. Then I'll take the time right now. If we're going to have people leave, I'll take time right now to thank everyone for being here. I know it's been a long day. I know that there's a lot of detail, a lot of questions, but I really do appreciate you being here and your willingness to work with the legislature and your willingness to try to come up with solutions, but also answering for the current election cycle. So thank you very much to you and everybody else who has testified.
Thank you.
Okay, members, any discussion? Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for pulling this whole thing together. I know it was a kind of a difficult thing to get together, especially with all this technology and stuff. Yeah, we've heard in county elections, I'm not casting aspersions on anybody, but I'm very concerned about the lack of integrity of the system itself, and especially on the provisional ballots. We've heard it all. So I'm hoping that we can get some kind of resolve to this, because nothing electronic is going to be secure. Michigan is already coming out with evidence that the system has been completely out of whack there, the Dominion system. So, a lot of these things are unfolding that they're finding out that the Dominion system software is already preloaded to, for irregularities, if you will. So I'm hoping that we can come up with some suggestions here before we adjourn.
Okay, Senator Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, always good to be in committee with you. Appreciate the way you. I just want to kind of reiterate, because I actually was talking with somebody the other day who was basically saying, why didn't you guys do a committee sooner? you know, hindsight is always 20/20. As we've heard from the county, there's things that they're limited on what they can do because of court cases. Some people don't understand some of the parameters of what can be done and what can't be done. And so I appreciate, one, your expertise in facilitating this meeting, but also hopefully it has helped people to see that, you know, we're not omnipotent. We can only do so much. I mean, we're still waiting to get the court cases over. Now, hopefully, as far as I'm concerned, we can have a forensic audit and a full hand count to clarify to our voters that there was integrity, and if there wasn't, then action can be taken from there. But again, I want to thank everybody for being on the committee, and for you, Mr. Chairman, for reconvening us, and for the president for calling this together. So thank you.
Senator Ugenti Rita.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate.
What do you think? Drop a comment below.